The seeds of what would become the Holy Inquisition were planted long before the catastrophic betrayal that would tear the galaxy asunder. During the height of the Great Crusade, as the Emperor's legions swept across the stars reclaiming lost worlds for humanity, the Master of Mankind began to perceive threats that extended far beyond the obvious dangers of Xeno's empires and techno-barbarian warlords. His psychic sight, unmatched in its scope and clarity, detected the insidious corruption that could fester within the very heart of his grand design. The Emperor understood that the greatest enemies of humanity might not come from without, but from within. Even as the Primarchs led their Space Marine legions in glorious conquest, the Emperor quietly began establishing networks of agents whose loyalty was absolute and whose purpose was singular: to watch, to listen, and to act when corruption threatened the Imperium from within. These early operatives worked in shadow, their existence known only to the Emperor himself and a select few among his most trusted advisors. They were not yet the Inquisition, but they were its conceptual ancestors, born from the Emperor's growing awareness that even his most beloved sons might one day turn against him. The wisdom of this foresight became horrifyingly apparent when War Master Horus, the Emperor's most favored son, fell to the whispers of chaos and plunged the galaxy into civil war. The Horus heresy revealed the terrible truth that the Emperor had long suspected: corruption could take root anywhere, even in the hearts of those who seemed most pure. 9 Primarchs turned traitor, taking their legions with them, and countless Imperial army regiments, planetary governors, and Imperial officials followed suit. The betrayal cut deep, not merely because of the military threat it posed, but because it demonstrated how thoroughly the enemy could infiltrate and subvert the very foundations of the Imperium. As the heresy raged across the galaxy, the Emperor's informal network of agents proved insufficient to counter the scale of corruption that had been unleashed. The enemy was not merely external forces to be fought with bolter and blade, but internal rot that required surgical precision to excise. The lessons learned during those dark years would fundamentally shape the organization that would emerge from the ashes of the Civil War. The Emperor realized that the Imperium required a permanent institution dedicated to rooting out heresy, mutation, and alien influence, one that operated with absolute authority and unwavering dedication to humanity's survival. Central to the formation of this new organization was Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's most trusted advisor and the man who would become known as the First Inquisitor. Malcador had served at the Emperor's side since the earliest days of the unification wars on Terra, his loyalty tested and proven through countless trials. His psychic abilities, while not matching the Emperor's own vast power, were formidable enough to peer into the souls of men and detect the taint of corruption. More importantly, his understanding of human nature, politics, and the delicate balance required to maintain an empire spanning the galaxy made him uniquely qualified to establish the principles that would guide the Inquisition for millennia to come. During the final years of the heresy, as the traitor forces closed in on Terra itself, Malcador began the formal process of establishing what would become the Holy Inquisition. Working closely with the Emperor, he developed the organizational structure that would allow the Inquisition to operate effectively across the vast expanse of the Imperium. The fundamental principle was simple yet profound. The Inquisition would answer to no authority save the Emperor himself, and its members would be granted extraordinary powers to investigate, judge, and execute those found guilty of heresy, mutation, or collaboration with Xeno's forces. The structure Malcador established was deliberately flexible, recognizing that the threats facing the Imperium would be diverse and ever-changing. Rather than creating a rigid hierarchy that might become bogged down in bureaucracy, he designed an organization of individuals who operated with considerable autonomy while remaining bound by shared principles and purpose. Each Inquisitor would be responsible for recruiting and training their own agents, building networks of informants, and pursuing investigations as they saw fit. This decentralized approach would prove crucial to the Inquisition's effectiveness, allowing it to adapt to local conditions and respond quickly to emerging threats. The selection criteria for the first Inquisitors were exacting. Malcador sought individuals who possessed not only exceptional ability and unwavering loyalty, but also the mental fortitude to confront the darkest aspects of human nature without succumbing to corruption themselves. Many of the early inquisitors were drawn from the ranks of the emperor's existing agents, men and women who had already proven their worth in the shadow war against internal enemies. Others came from the Space Marine legions, particularly those who had demonstrated exceptional resistance to the corruption that had claimed their brothers. Still others were recruited from the Imperial Army, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and even civilian populations, chosen for their unique skills and absolute dedication to the imperial cause. The training of these first inquisitors was intensive and comprehensive. They were schooled not only in the arts of war and investigation, but also in the recognition of corruption in all its forms. They learned to identify the subtle signs of chaos taint, the physiological markers of mutation, and the behavioral patterns that might indicate Xeno's influence or collaboration. Perhaps most importantly, they were taught to maintain their own spiritual purity in the face of horrors that would drive lesser men to madness or despair. The Siege of Terra marked a crucial turning point in the development of the Inquisition. As traitor forces breached the outer defenses of the Imperial Palace and the Emperor prepared for his final confrontation with Horus, the need for an organization capable of preventing future betrayals became more urgent than ever. The sight of Space Marines fighting Space Marines, of Imperial Army units turning their weapons on former comrades, and of entire populations embracing the worship of the Chaos Gods, drove home the reality that the Imperium's enemies were not merely external threats to be defeated in battle, but internal cancers that required constant vigilance to detect and excise. When the Emperor finally confronted Horus aboard the War Master's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, the resulting psychic shockwave reverberated across the galaxy. The Emperor's victory came at a terrible cost, leaving him mortally wounded and requiring his internment upon the Golden Throne to sustain his life and maintain the Astronomicon. This pivotal moment marked the transition from the informal network of agents that had served the Emperor during the Great Crusade to the formal institution that would become the Holy Inquisition. With the Emperor no longer able to directly oversee the vast network of agents and operatives he had established, the responsibility fell to Malcador and the first generation of Inquisitors to formalize the organization's structure and codify its operating principles. The Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne created a power vacuum that threatened to tear the Imperium apart, and the newly established Inquisition found itself thrust into a crucial role in maintaining imperial unity and preventing further rebellions. The early Inquisitors faced challenges that would have seemed insurmountable to lesser men. The Imperium was reeling from the devastation of the heresy, with entire sectors in ruins and countless worlds either destroyed or fallen to chaos. The surviving loyal Space Marine legions were being reorganized according to the Codex Astartes, breaking them down into smaller chapters to prevent any single commander from wielding the kind of power that had enabled Horus's rebellion. The Imperial Army was being restructured into the Astra Militarum, with new command structures and safeguards designed to prevent large-scale defections. In this environment of upheaval and reconstruction, the Inquisition's mandate was clear but daunting: to root out heresy, mutation, and alien influence wherever it might be found within the Imperium. This task required not only exceptional skill and dedication, but also the authority to act decisively when corruption was discovered. The early Inquisitors were granted powers that would have been unthinkable in the pre-heresy Imperium, including the authority to requisition military assets, override local government decisions, and even order the destruction of entire worlds if necessary to prevent the spread of corruption. The scope of the Inquisition's responsibilities was deliberately broad, reflecting the hard-learned lessons of the heresy. Heresy was defined not merely as the worship of the Chaos Gods, but as any deviation from the imperial truth that might weaken humanity's resolve or create openings for corruption. Mutation was to be hunted down relentlessly, as the physical corruption of the human form was seen as both a sign of spiritual weakness and a potential gateway for further corruption. Alien influence was to be eliminated wherever it was found, as the Xenos races were viewed as inherently hostile to human interests and potential allies of chaos. The early Inquisitors developed investigative techniques and operational procedures that would serve as templates for their successors for millennia to come. They learned to work through networks of informants and agents, gathering intelligence on potential threats while maintaining their own anonymity. They developed methods for infiltrating suspected heretical organizations, using a combination of surveillance, interrogation, and psychic investigation to uncover the truth. They established protocols for dealing with different types of corruption, from the subtle influence of chaos cults to the more obvious threat of Xenos infiltration. The organizational culture that emerged during these formative years was shaped by the traumatic experience of the heresy and the constant awareness that corruption could strike anywhere at any time. The Inquisitors developed a mindset of perpetual vigilance, viewing every citizen of the Imperium as a potential threat until proven otherwise. This paranoid worldview, while perhaps excessive in some cases, reflected the genuine reality that the enemies of humanity were cunning, patient, and capable of corrupting even the most seemingly loyal servants of the Emperor. The relationship between the Inquisition and other imperial institutions was complex from the beginning. While the Inquisitors possessed the authority to override local commanders and requisition resources as needed, they also recognized the importance of maintaining working relationships with the military, administrative, and ecclesiastical hierarchies that kept the Imperium functioning. The most successful early Inquisitors learned to balance their extraordinary powers with diplomatic skill, using persuasion and cooperation when possible, while reserving their ultimate authority for situations where immediate action was required. The geographic scope of the Inquisition's operations was vast, encompassing the entire Imperium and extending even beyond its borders when necessary. The early Inquisitors established a network of safe houses, communication relays, and supply caches that would allow them to operate effectively in even the most remote sectors of the galaxy. They developed relationships with rogue trader dynasties, space marine chapters, and other organizations that could provide transportation, intelligence, and military support when needed. As the fledgling Inquisition grew from its origins in the shadow of the Horus Heresy, the diversity of threats facing the Imperium became increasingly apparent. The early Inquisitors, while united in their dedication to the Emperor's vision, quickly discovered that the enemies of humanity manifested in countless forms, each requiring specialized knowledge and tactics to combat effectively. The demons of the warp operated according to different principles than Xenos infiltrators, while heretical cults presented challenges distinct from both. This recognition of the multifaceted nature of the threats facing the Imperium led to the gradual development of specialized branches within the Inquisition, each focusing on particular categories of enemies while maintaining the organization's fundamental unity of purpose. The Ordo Malleus emerged as the first and perhaps most crucial of these specialized branches, born from the terrible lessons learned during the heresy about the reality of chaos and its corrupting influence. The name itself, meaning hammer in High Gothic, reflected the Order's primary function as the Inquisition's weapon against the forces of the warp. The Inquisitors who gravitated toward this specialization were those who had witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of demonic incursions and chaos corruption during the Civil War. They understood that the entities dwelling within the warp were not merely alien beings to be fought with conventional weapons, but manifestations of pure malevolence that required specialized knowledge and equipment to combat effectively. The Ordo Malleus developed an expertise in recognizing the subtle signs of chaos corruption that might precede a full demonic manifestation. Their agents learned to identify the psychological and physical changes that occurred in individuals exposed to warp energies, from the barely perceptible alterations in behavior that might indicate possession to the more obvious mutations that marked advanced corruption. They studied the ritual practices employed by chaos cults, learning to recognize the arcane symbols, chants, and sacrificial rites that could thin the barriers between real space and the warp. This knowledge proved invaluable in preventing minor cult activities from escalating into full-scale demonic incursions. The relationship between the Ordo Malleus and the Grey Knights became one of the most significant partnerships in the Imperium's arsenal against chaos. The Grey Knights, that most secretive of Space Marine chapters, were specifically created to combat demonic threats, their genetic modifications and psychic conditioning making them uniquely resistant to chaos corruption. The Ordo Malleus provided the intelligence networks and investigative capabilities that allowed the Grey Knights to deploy their specialized combat abilities where they were most needed. When an Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus identified a demonic threat that required immediate military intervention, the Grey Knights could respond with surgical precision, their force weapons and psychic abilities proving devastatingly effective against entities that conventional weapons could barely harm. The coordination between these two organizations went beyond simple military cooperation. Many Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus worked closely with Grey Knights throughout their careers, learning from the chapter's accumulated knowledge of demonic entities and warp phenomena. The Grey Knights' fortress monastery on Titan served as a repository of forbidden knowledge about chaos, its libraries containing detailed accounts of demonic hierarchies, weaknesses, and binding rituals that proved invaluable to Inquisitors conducting investigations into chaos cults. This partnership was not without its challenges, as the Grey Knights' absolute secrecy sometimes conflicted with the Inquisition's need for information, but the mutual respect between the two organizations generally overcame such difficulties. The Ordo Hereticus developed along different lines, focusing on the internal threats that could undermine the Imperium from within. Where the Ordo Malleus looked outward to the warp for threats, the Ordo Hereticus looked inward, examining the human institutions and organizations that formed the backbone of imperial society. The Inquisitors of this order understood that heresy could take many forms, from the obvious worship of chaos gods to the more subtle corruption of imperial doctrine that might weaken the faith and loyalty of the Emperor's subjects. The scope of the Ordo Hereticus's mandate was deliberately broad, encompassing not only obvious heretical cults, but also rogue psykers, corrupt officials, and even entire imperial institutions that might have strayed from orthodox doctrine. The Order's agents became experts in infiltration and surveillance, learning to blend into imperial society while observing for signs of corruption or deviation from accepted beliefs. They developed techniques for identifying and neutralizing rogue psykers before their uncontrolled abilities could attract demonic attention or cause widespread destruction. The threat posed by unsanctioned psykers was particularly acute, as these individuals could serve as conduits for chaos corruption, even without conscious intent to betray the Imperium. One of the most sensitive aspects of the Ordo Hereticus's work involved monitoring the ecclesiarchy, the vast religious organization responsible for maintaining the imperial cult throughout the galaxy. The Inquisitors of this order walked a delicate line, recognizing the crucial role that faith played in maintaining imperial unity, while remaining vigilant for signs that religious fervor might be corrupted into heretical worship. They investigated reports of miracle workers who might actually be unsanctioned psykers, examined new religious movements that might contain elements of chaos worship, and monitored the activities of high-ranking ecclesiastical officials who wielded enormous influence over imperial citizens. The Ordo Hereticus also concerned itself with the threat posed by various heretical movements that sought to undermine imperial authority through political rather than religious means. These could include separatist movements on individual worlds, corrupt planetary governors who prioritized personal gain over imperial law, or even entire sectors that might be drifting away from central authority. The Order's Inquisitors became skilled in political manipulation and intrigue, learning to work within existing power structures to identify and eliminate threats while maintaining the stability of imperial governance. The Ordo Xenos represented the Inquisition's response to the myriad alien threats that surrounded humanity on all sides. The Inquisitors of this order understood that the galaxy was filled with hostile Xeno species, each presenting unique challenges that required specialized knowledge and tactics to counter effectively. The Order's mandate extended beyond simple military threats to encompass the more subtle dangers posed by alien influence, technology, and ideology that might corrupt human society from within. The Eldar presented one of the most complex challenges faced by the Ordo Xenos. These ancient aliens possessed psychic abilities that rivaled those of humanity's most powerful psykers, along with technology that seemed to operate according to principles that Imperial science could barely comprehend. The Inquisitors studying Eldar activities learned to recognize the subtle signs of their intervention in human affairs, from the mysterious disappearance of key individuals to the seemingly random events that might actually be part of some incomprehensible alien scheme. The Eldar's ability to see potential futures made them particularly dangerous opponents, as they could anticipate and counter human actions before they were even undertaken. The Orc menace required a different approach entirely. These brutal aliens thrived on warfare and violence, their crude but effective technology powered by their collective psychic field that could make even the most ramshackle weapons function through sheer belief. The Ordo Xenos developed expertise in recognizing the early signs of Orc infestation, from the appearance of primitive settlements to the electromagnetic signatures of their crude but powerful technology. They learned to predict Orc migration patterns and identify the conditions that might trigger a major war that could threaten entire sectors of the Imperium. The emergence of the Tyranid swarms presented an entirely new category of threat that tested the Ordo Xenos' adaptability to its limits. These alien creatures operated according to a hive mind intelligence that seemed to learn and adapt with each encounter, making traditional tactical approaches increasingly ineffective. The Order's Inquisitors worked closely with the Adeptus Mechanicus to study captured Tyranid specimens, seeking to understand the biological and psychic mechanisms that allowed the swarms to function with such terrifying efficiency. The discovery that the Tyranids were drawn to worlds with high concentrations of psychic activity led to difficult decisions about the deployment of sanctioned psykers and the evacuation of psychically active populations from threatened worlds. The Tau Empire's expansion into Imperial space presented yet another challenge, as these aliens combined advanced technology with a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and sociology. The Tau's concept of the greater good appealed to some Imperial citizens who had grown disillusioned with the harsh realities of Imperial rule, making them particularly dangerous from the Ordo Xenos' perspective. The Order's agents learned to identify human populations that might be susceptible to Tau influence, monitoring for signs of ideological corruption that might precede actual alien infiltration. The overlapping jurisdictions between the three major orders created both opportunities and challenges for the Inquisition as a whole. Many threats could not be neatly categorized as purely demonic, heretical, or Xenos in nature, requiring cooperation between Inquisitors from different orders to address effectively. A chaos cult might employ alien technology in its rituals, creating a threat that required expertise from both the Ordo Malleus and the Ordo Xenos. A heretical movement might be secretly supported by alien influences, necessitating joint investigation by the Ordo Hereticus and the Ordo Xenos. A demonic incursion might be facilitated by corrupt Imperial officials, requiring coordination between the Ordo Malleus and the Ordo Hereticus. These multifaceted threats often led to jurisdictional disputes between the orders, as individual Inquisitors might claim primary authority based on their particular area of expertise. Such conflicts were not merely academic exercises, but could have serious operational consequences, as delays in response or conflicting approaches might allow threats to escalate beyond the point where they could be easily contained. The Inquisition developed informal protocols for resolving such disputes, generally based on the principle that the most immediate threat took precedence, but these arrangements were not always sufficient to prevent conflicts between strong-willed Inquisitors who believed their approach was superior. The coordination of efforts between the three major orders was facilitated by the Inquisition's decentralized structure, which allowed for flexible responses to emerging threats while maintaining overall unity of purpose. Inquisitors from different orders often work together on investigations that cross jurisdictional boundaries, sharing intelligence and resources as needed to address complex threats. The most successful joint operations typically involved clear delineation of responsibilities, with each order contributing its specialized expertise while respecting the other's areas of authority. The development of the three major orders reflected the Inquisition's evolution from a relatively simple organization focused on preventing another Horus heresy into a sophisticated institution capable of addressing the full spectrum of threats facing the Imperium. Each order developed its own culture, traditions, and operating procedures, while remaining bound by the fundamental principles established by Malcador and the first generation of Inquisitors. This specialization allowed the Inquisition to develop deep expertise in combating specific types of threats, while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to new challenges as they emerged. The organizational structure of the Holy Inquisition represents one of the most complex and deliberately opaque hierarchies within the Imperium of Man. Unlike the rigid command structures found in the Astra Militarum or the clearly defined ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, the Inquisition operates on principles that prioritize individual authority and operational flexibility over traditional military hierarchy. This unique approach to organization stems directly from the lessons learned during the Horus Heresy, where rigid command structures proved vulnerable to corruption and betrayal at the highest levels. At the foundation of the Inquisition's hierarchy stand the acolytes, individuals who have been recruited by full inquisitors but have not yet achieved the rank and authority of an inquisitor themselves. These men and women come from diverse backgrounds across the Imperium, selected for their particular skills, unwavering loyalty, and demonstrated resistance to corruption. Some acolytes are former members of the Adeptus Arbites who have shown exceptional investigative abilities and moral fortitude. Others might be ex-Imperial Guard veterans whose combat experience and knowledge of military operations make them valuable assets in the field. Scholars from various Imperial institutions, tech adepts from the Adeptus Mechanicus, and even former criminals who have proven their redemption through service all find their way into the ranks of the acolytes. The selection process for acolytes is intensely personal and varies significantly between individual inquisitors. Some prefer to recruit from established Imperial institutions, using their authority to requisition promising candidates from the Schola Progenium or other training facilities. Others maintain extensive networks of informants and agents, identifying potential recruits through years of observation and evaluation. The most paranoid inquisitors sometimes recruit from the very organizations they investigate, selecting individuals who have demonstrated their loyalty by reporting on corruption within their own ranks. Training for acolytes is rigorous and comprehensive, though it varies considerably depending on the preferences and specializations of their inquisitor. All acolytes receive instruction in the recognition of heresy, mutation, and alien influence, learning to identify the subtle signs that might indicate corruption before it becomes obvious to less trained observers. They study the various forms of chaos worship, memorizing the symbols, rituals, and behavioral patterns associated with different cults. Physical training emphasizes both combat skills and survival techniques, as acolytes must be prepared to operate in hostile environments ranging from hive city undercities to feral worlds where civilization has collapsed. The psychological conditioning of acolytes is perhaps the most crucial aspect of their training. They must learn to confront the darkest aspects of human nature without succumbing to despair or corruption themselves. This involves exposure to carefully controlled examples of heretical material, allowing them to build mental defenses against the psychological warfare employed by chaos cults. Many acolytes undergo hypno-conditioning to reinforce their loyalty and provide them with mental triggers that can help them resist psychic influence or torture. The mortality rate during this training phase is significant, as some individuals prove unable to withstand the psychological pressures or demonstrate susceptibility to corruption. Above the acolytes in the hierarchy are the interrogators, individuals who have proven their worth through years of faithful service, but have not yet achieved the full rank of inquisitor. The transition from acolyte to interrogator is not automatic, but requires demonstration of exceptional ability, unwavering loyalty, and the mental fortitude necessary to handle increasingly sensitive investigations. Interrogators typically serve as the senior agents in an inquisitor's retinue, often leading teams of acolytes on preliminary investigations or handling routine matters that do not require the personal attention of their master. The responsibilities of interrogators extend far beyond simple field work. They often serve as liaisons between their inquisitor and other imperial institutions, using their authority to gather information, requisition resources, and coordinate with local officials. Many interrogators specialize in particular aspects of investigation, such as forensic analysis, interrogation techniques, or the identification of specific types of corruption. Their expertise makes them invaluable assets to their inquisitors, who rely on their subordinates' specialized knowledge to conduct thorough and effective investigations. The relationship between interrogators and their inquisitors is complex and highly personal. Unlike the formal command structures found in other imperial institutions, the bond between an inquisitor and their interrogators is built on mutual trust and shared experience. Many interrogators serve with the same inquisitor for decades, developing an almost telepathic understanding of their master's methods and preferences. This close working relationship is essential for effective operations, as interrogators must often act independently while remaining true to their inquisitor's intentions and standards. The rank of full inquisitor represents the pinnacle of authority within the organization's operational hierarchy. The transition from interrogator to inquisitor is one of the most significant promotions possible within the Imperium, as it grants the individual extraordinary powers and responsibilities. Unlike other imperial ranks, which are typically awarded through bureaucratic processes or military achievement, the elevation to inquisitor requires the approval of existing inquisitors who must vouch for the candidate's readiness to wield such awesome authority. The process of becoming an inquisitor varies considerably depending on circumstances and the preferences of the sponsoring inquisitors. Some interrogators are elevated following the death of their master, inheriting responsibility for ongoing investigations and the loyalty of surviving retinue members. Others are promoted based on exceptional performance during particularly challenging investigations, demonstrating the judgment and moral fortitude necessary to make life and death decisions affecting entire worlds. The most rigorous promotions involve formal testing by panels of experienced inquisitors who evaluate candidates through a combination of written examinations, practical tests, and intensive psychological evaluation. Once elevated to the rank of inquisitor, individuals gain access to resources and authority that would be unimaginable to most imperial citizens. A full inquisitor can requisition military assets from any imperial organization, override the decisions of planetary governors, and even order the destruction of entire worlds if necessary to prevent the spread of corruption. This extraordinary authority comes with equally extraordinary responsibility, as inquisitors must exercise their power with wisdom and restraint to avoid causing unnecessary harm to the Imperium they serve. The independence granted to full inquisitors is both the organization's greatest strength and its most significant weakness. Each inquisitor operates with considerable autonomy, able to pursue investigations and deploy resources according to their own judgment. This flexibility allows the Inquisition to respond quickly to emerging threats and adapt to local conditions without waiting for approval from distant superiors. However, it also creates the potential for conflicts between inquisitors who disagree on methods or priorities, and occasionally leads to situations where individual inquisitors exceed their authority or pursue personal agendas at the expense of the greater good. The accountability mechanisms for inquisitors are deliberately limited, reflecting the organization's fundamental principle that those who watch the watchers must themselves be beyond reproach. Inquisitors are expected to police themselves and their colleagues, reporting suspected corruption or abuse of authority to their peers. When conflicts arise between inquisitors, they are typically resolved through informal consultation or, in extreme cases, formal tribunals where panels of senior inquisitors evaluate the disputed actions and render judgment. At the apex of the Inquisition's hierarchy stand the Inquisitor Lords, individuals who have demonstrated exceptional ability and judgment over decades or centuries of service. The elevation to Inquisitor Lord is not automatic, but requires recognition by peers and demonstrated excellence in combating the enemies of humanity. These senior inquisitors often specialize in coordinating large-scale operations that require the cooperation of multiple inquisitors or the deployment of significant military assets. Inquisitor Lords serve various functions within the organization, from leading major investigations that span multiple sectors to serving as representatives to other imperial institutions. Their experience and authority make them natural leaders during crises that require coordinated responses from the Inquisition. However, they retain the same operational independence as regular inquisitors, able to pursue their own investigations and deploy resources according to their judgment. The relationship between the Inquisition and the highest levels of imperial governance is formalized through the position of the inquisitorial representative among the High Lords of Terra. This individual, typically an Inquisitor Lord of exceptional standing, serves as the voice of the Inquisition in the council that governs the Imperium in the Emperor's name. The inquisitorial representative occupies one of the 12 seats that form the inner circle of imperial power, alongside the Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum, and other senior officials. The selection of the inquisitorial representative follows no formal process, as the Inquisition's decentralized structure makes democratic election impractical. Instead, the position typically goes to an individual who has gained the respect and support of their peers through exceptional service and demonstrated wisdom. The representative serves as both advocate for the Inquisition's interests and coordinator of its activities when they intersect with broader imperial policy. This role requires exceptional diplomatic skills, as the representative must balance the Inquisition's need for independence with the practical requirements of imperial governance. The presence of an inquisitorial representative among the High Lords ensures that the organization's perspective is considered in the highest levels of imperial decision-making. This is particularly important when dealing with threats that require coordinated responses from multiple imperial institutions, such as large-scale chaos incursions or Xenos invasions that threaten entire sectors. The representative can authorize the deployment of inquisitorial resources in support of broader imperial strategies, while ensuring that the organization's unique capabilities are used effectively. The regional organization of the Inquisition reflects the practical challenges of maintaining effective operations across the vast expanse of the Imperium. Rather than attempting to establish a centralized command structure that would be vulnerable to corruption or disruption, the Inquisition operates through a network of regional facilities and informal associations that provide support and coordination without compromising individual autonomy. Inquisition fortresses serve as the primary regional headquarters for the organization, providing secure facilities for training, research, and coordination of major operations. These installations are typically located in heavily defended systems with reliable astropathic communication links to other parts of the Imperium. The fortresses contain extensive libraries of forbidden knowledge, secure detention facilities for dangerous prisoners, and workshops where specialized equipment can be manufactured or maintained. Most importantly, they serve as neutral ground where inquisitors can meet to share information and coordinate their activities without compromising their operational security. The design and construction of Inquisition fortresses reflects the organization's paranoid approach to security. These facilities are built to withstand both external assault and internal corruption, with multiple layers of physical and psychic defenses. Access is strictly controlled through a combination of biometric scanners, psychic probes, and personal vouching by trusted inquisitors. The fortresses are staffed by carefully vetted personnel who have undergone extensive loyalty testing and psychological conditioning to ensure their reliability. Within each fortress, separate sections are maintained for different types of operations and research. The archives contain detailed records of investigations, cataloged specimens of heretical artifacts, and intelligence reports from across the region. The detention facilities are designed to hold prisoners who pose various types of threats, from rogue psykers whose abilities require specialized containment to heretical leaders whose knowledge makes them too valuable to execute immediately. The workshops produce specialized equipment that cannot be obtained through normal Imperial supply channels, from custom weapons designed to combat specific types of enemies to detection devices that can identify subtle forms of corruption. Conclaves represent the Inquisition's primary mechanism for coordination and information sharing at the regional level. These gatherings bring together inquisitors from across a sector or group of sectors to discuss ongoing investigations, share intelligence, and coordinate responses to major threats. The frequency and format of conclaves vary considerably depending on local conditions and the preferences of the participating inquisitors. Some regions hold formal conclaves on regular schedules, while others convene only when specific threats require coordinated responses. The atmosphere at conclaves reflects the complex relationships between individual inquisitors who must balance their natural independence with the need for cooperation and mutual support. These gatherings can be tense affairs, as strong-willed individuals with different approaches to combating heresy attempt to find common ground. Disputes over jurisdiction, methodology, and resource allocation are common, but they are typically resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than formal authority structures. The information shared at conclaves represents some of the most sensitive intelligence available to the Imperium. Inquisitors present detailed reports on their investigations, including evidence of corruption patterns, enemy tactics, and potential threats that may be developing in neighboring regions. This intelligence sharing is crucial for identifying large-scale threats that might not be apparent to individual inquisitors operating in isolation. Patterns of corruption that seem random when viewed from a single world or system may reveal coordinated enemy activities when examined from a broader perspective. The autonomous nature of individual inquisitors' operations creates both opportunities and challenges for the organization as a whole. The flexibility to pursue investigations according to personal judgment allows inquisitors to respond quickly to emerging threats and adapt their methods to local conditions. This autonomy has proven crucial in countless situations where rigid adherence to standard procedures would have allowed corruption to spread unchecked. However, it also creates the potential for conflicts between inquisitors who disagree on priorities or methods, and occasionally leads to situations where individual operations work at cross purposes. The resolution of conflicts between autonomous inquisitors requires careful diplomacy and mutual respect. When jurisdictional disputes arise, they are typically resolved through informal consultation between the involved parties, with more senior inquisitors serving as mediators when necessary. The organization's culture emphasizes the importance of the greater good over personal pride, encouraging inquisitors to set aside their differences when the safety of the Imperium is at stake. However, this ideal is not always achieved in practice, and some conflicts between inquisitors have escalated to the point where they interfere with effective operations. The Inquisition's relationship with other imperial institutions is complex and often contentious, reflecting the organization's unique position within the imperial hierarchy. While inquisitors possess the authority to requisition resources and override local decisions, they must also maintain working relationships with the military, administrative, and ecclesiastical organizations that keep the Imperium functioning. The most successful inquisitors learn to balance their extraordinary powers with diplomatic skill, using persuasion and cooperation when possible while reserving their ultimate authority for situations that require immediate action. The authority to requisition resources from any imperial organization represents one of the Inquisition's most significant powers and one of its most frequent sources of conflict with other institutions. When an inquisitor requisitions military assets from the Astra Militarum, naval vessels from the Imperial Navy, or technical expertise from the Adeptus Mechanicus, they are essentially commandeering resources that may be desperately needed for other purposes. Local commanders often resent these requisitions, particularly when they are not provided with explanations for why their assets are needed or when they will be returned. The process of requisitioning resources requires careful consideration of both operational needs and political consequences. Experienced inquisitors understand that heavy-handed use of their authority can create lasting resentment and make future cooperation more difficult. They often prefer to work through existing command structures when possible, requesting rather than demanding assistance and providing sufficient explanation to secure willing cooperation. However, when time is critical or when local officials cannot be trusted with sensitive information, inquisitors do not hesitate to exercise their full authority regardless of the political consequences. The investigative methods employed by the Inquisition represent a fusion of ancient techniques refined over millennia and cutting-edge imperial technology adapted for the unique challenges of rooting out corruption across a galaxy-spanning empire. Every inquisitor develops their own preferred approaches based on their specialization, personal philosophy, and the specific threats they most commonly encounter, yet certain fundamental principles and tools remain consistent across the organization. The art of investigation within the Inquisition extends far beyond simple evidence gathering, encompassing psychological warfare, technological surveillance, and methods of extracting truth that would horrify citizens of more civilized ages. Interrogation forms the cornerstone of most inquisitorial investigations, though the techniques employed vary dramatically depending on the subject, the urgency of the situation, and the personal preferences of the interrogating inquisitor. The most basic level involves conventional questioning, where skilled interrogators use psychological pressure, careful observation of body language, and strategic revelation of information to extract confessions or uncover deception. Inquisitors and their agents receive extensive training in reading micro-expressions, detecting vocal stress patterns, and identifying the subtle physiological changes that accompany lying or concealment of information. The integration of technology into interrogation procedures has revolutionized the Inquisition's ability to extract reliable information from reluctant subjects. Verity scanners, sophisticated devices that monitor brain activity, heart rate, and biochemical responses, can detect deception with remarkable accuracy when properly calibrated. These instruments require careful interpretation by trained operators, as skilled liars or individuals with certain types of mental conditioning can sometimes fool the scanners. More advanced versions incorporate limited psychic components that can detect emotional states and thought patterns, though these require psyker operators and carry the inherent risks associated with any use of psychic abilities. Mind scramblers represent one of the more controversial tools in the Inquisition's arsenal, devices that can temporarily disrupt cognitive function and lower psychological defenses. These instruments work by generating specific electromagnetic frequencies that interfere with neural activity, making subjects more susceptible to suggestion and less able to maintain conscious deception. The effects are temporary but can be extremely disorienting, causing severe headaches, nausea, and temporary memory loss. The use of mind scramblers requires careful calibration, as excessive exposure can cause permanent brain damage or complete mental breakdown. When conventional interrogation proves insufficient, many inquisitors turn to more invasive techniques that exploit the unique capabilities available within the Imperium. Psychic probing represents one of the most effective methods for extracting information from uncooperative subjects, though it requires the services of a trained psyker and carries significant risks for both interrogator and subject. A skilled telepath can delve directly into a subject's mind, accessing memories and thoughts that the individual might not even be consciously aware of possessing. This technique can reveal hidden knowledge, suppressed memories, and even subconscious influences that might indicate corruption or alien manipulation. The process of psychic interrogation is neither simple nor safe. The human mind instinctively resists invasion, and most individuals possess natural psychological defenses that must be overcome before their thoughts can be accessed. Subjects with strong willpower or specific mental training can sometimes resist psychic probing entirely, while others may suffer permanent psychological damage from the intrusion. The interrogating psyker also faces risks, as exposure to another person's memories and emotions can be traumatic, particularly when dealing with individuals who have been exposed to chaos, corruption, or alien influence. Sanctioned psykers assigned to inquisitorial service undergo specialized training in interrogation techniques that goes far beyond the basic telepathic abilities taught in standard Imperial facilities. They learn to navigate the complex landscape of human memory, distinguishing between genuine recollections and false memories implanted by enemies or created by trauma. Advanced practitioners can even access genetic memories stored in an individual's DNA, though this technique is extremely dangerous and often results in the subject's death. The most skilled psychic interrogators can perform their work with surgical precision, extracting specific information while leaving the subject's personality and core memories intact. Physical torture remains a tool of last resort for most inquisitors, though its use is neither forbidden nor uncommon when dealing with particularly dangerous heretics, or when time constraints make more subtle approaches impractical. The Inquisition maintains detailed knowledge of human anatomy and psychology, understanding precisely how to inflict maximum pain while keeping subjects conscious and capable of providing information. Traditional methods include the application of heat, cold, electrical stimulation, and various forms of physical trauma designed to break down resistance without causing immediate death. More sophisticated torture techniques incorporate technology and medical knowledge to maximize effectiveness while minimizing the risk of losing valuable subjects. Pain amplifiers can magnify the sensation of even minor discomfort to unbearable levels, while neural stimulators can trigger specific types of agony without causing any physical damage. Medical servitors can monitor vital signs and administer drugs to keep subjects conscious and responsive even under extreme duress. The most advanced torture chambers resemble medical facilities more than dungeons, equipped with life support systems that can sustain subjects through procedures that would normally prove fatal. The psychological aspects of torture often prove more effective than physical pain alone. Experienced interrogators understand that the anticipation of pain can be more powerful than the actual experience, and they use this knowledge to break down subjects' resistance through carefully orchestrated psychological pressure. The threat of harm to loved ones, the gradual revelation of the interrogator's knowledge about the subject's activities, and the systematic destruction of the subject's sense of hope and dignity can all contribute to eventual cooperation. Servo skulls represent one of the most ubiquitous tools in the Inquisition's investigative arsenal, their versatility and reliability making them indispensable for surveillance, reconnaissance, and evidence gathering. These cybernetic constructs, built around human skulls and equipped with various sensors and recording devices, can access areas too dangerous or too small for human agents while providing real-time intelligence to their operators. The basic servo skull configuration includes optical sensors capable of recording both visible light and infrared radiation, audio pickups sensitive enough to detect whispered conversations, and compact Vox transmitters for communication with handlers. Specialized servo skulls can be equipped with additional sensors tailored to specific investigative needs. Auspex-equipped variants can detect energy signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and other technological phenomena that might indicate the presence of forbidden technology or alien devices. Atmospheric analyzers can identify chemical traces that might reveal the use of exotic drugs, toxins, or ritual substances associated with heretical activities. Some servo skulls carry miniaturized gene scanners capable of collecting and analyzing biological samples, allowing investigators to identify individuals from trace amounts of genetic material left at crime scenes. The deployment of servo skulls requires careful planning and coordination to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing the risk of detection. These devices are not silent, producing a distinctive humming sound from their anti-gravity generators that can alert observant targets to their presence. Skilled operators learn to use environmental noise, architectural features, and timing to mask their servo-skull's approach and withdrawal. The most sophisticated operations involve coordinated swarms of servo-skulls working together to provide comprehensive surveillance coverage of large areas or complex facilities. Combat-configured servo-skulls serve as both reconnaissance assets and weapons platforms, capable of engaging targets with integrated weapon systems or self-destructing to eliminate evidence or neutralize threats. These variants typically carry compact laser weapons, needle pistols loaded with exotic toxins, or small explosive charges that can be detonated remotely. The psychological impact of these floating skulls should not be underestimated, as their appearance often proves as effective as their weapons in intimidating targets and extracting cooperation. The maintenance and operation of servo skulls requires specialized technical knowledge that many Inquisitors acquire through formal training with the Adeptus Mechanicus or informal apprenticeships with tech adepts assigned to their retinues. The ritual aspects of servo skull operation are as important as the technical components, as these devices incorporate blessed machine spirits that must be properly appeased to ensure reliable function. Regular maintenance involves not only mechanical adjustments and software updates, but also ritual purification and the burning of sacred incense to maintain the machine spirit's cooperation. Surveillance networks form the backbone of most inquisitorial investigations, providing the continuous monitoring and intelligence gathering necessary to track complex conspiracies and identify emerging threats. These networks operate on multiple levels, from individual informants embedded within suspect organizations to sophisticated technological systems that can monitor entire planetary populations. The construction and maintenance of effective surveillance networks requires careful balance between security, effectiveness, and the resources available to individual Inquisitors. Human informants remain the most valuable components of any surveillance network, providing insights into motivations, relationships, and plans that technological surveillance cannot detect. The recruitment of informants requires careful assessment of potential candidates, identifying individuals with access to relevant information who can be motivated to cooperate with inquisitorial investigations. Some informants are motivated by genuine loyalty to the Emperor and horror at the corruption they have witnessed, while others require more tangible incentives, such as protection from enemies, financial compensation, or clemency for past transgressions. The management of informant networks presents numerous challenges that require constant attention from Inquisitors and their agents. Informants must be protected from discovery by the organizations they are monitoring, which often requires elaborate cover stories and careful coordination of their activities. The information they provide must be verified through independent sources, as even well-intentioned informants can be deceived or manipulated by their targets. The most dangerous informants are those who have been discovered and turned by enemy agents, as they can provide false information designed to mislead investigations or identify other members of the surveillance network. Technological surveillance systems supplement human intelligence, gathering with capabilities that exceed what individual agents can accomplish. Vox intercept stations can monitor communications across entire systems, using sophisticated analysis software to identify suspicious patterns or keywords that might indicate heretical activity. These systems must be carefully calibrated to avoid being overwhelmed by the enormous volume of legitimate communications that flow through Imperial networks, requiring advanced filtering algorithms and human analysts to separate significant intelligence from background noise. The monitoring of astropathic communications presents unique challenges and opportunities for inquisitorial surveillance. Astropaths, the psykers responsible for faster-than-light communication across the Imperium, can sometimes detect patterns in the psychic emanations that accompany their messages that reveal information about the sender's emotional state or hidden meanings. Skilled astropaths assigned to inquisitorial service learn to identify the psychic signatures associated with different types of corruption, allowing them to flag communications that might warrant further investigation. The interception of astropathic messages requires extreme caution, as the psychic energies involved can attract unwanted attention from entities dwelling within the warp. Astropaths performing surveillance duties must be constantly monitored for signs of corruption or possession, and their work areas must be heavily warded with protective symbols and blessed equipment. The most sensitive interception operations are conducted within specially constructed chambers that combine physical shielding with psychic barriers to prevent detection by hostile forces. Forensic investigation within the Inquisition incorporates both traditional evidence analysis techniques and specialized methods developed to address the unique challenges of investigating corruption in a galaxy where the laws of physics can be bent by psychic forces and alien technology. Crime scene analysis begins with careful documentation of all physical evidence, using high-resolution imaging systems and detailed measurements to create comprehensive records that can be analyzed by experts throughout the Imperium. The preservation of evidence requires special techniques when dealing with materials that might be tainted by chaos energies or alien influences. The analysis of warp taint represents one of the most specialized aspects of inquisitorial forensics, requiring equipment and expertise that exists nowhere else in the Imperium. Warp taint manifests in numerous ways, from subtle alterations in the molecular structure of affected materials to obvious mutations and supernatural phenomena. Specialized sensors can detect the residual psychic energy that lingers at sites where demonic manifestations have occurred, while trained psykers can sometimes read the psychic impressions left by traumatic events or powerful emotions. The identification of genetic corruption requires sophisticated analysis techniques that can detect even minor deviations from baseline human genetic patterns. Portable gene scanners can provide preliminary results within minutes, identifying obvious mutations or signs of alien hybridization. More detailed analysis requires laboratory facilities equipped with cogitator systems capable of comparing genetic samples against vast databases of known corruption patterns. The most advanced genetic analysis can identify exposure to specific types of chaos corruption or alien influence, providing crucial intelligence about the sources and methods of contamination. Chemical analysis of substances found at investigation sites often reveals evidence of exotic drugs, ritual components, or alien biochemistry that can provide important clues about the nature of suspected corruption. Many heretical cults use specific combinations of narcotics and hallucinogens to induce religious experiences or facilitate communication with demonic entities. The identification of these substances can help investigators understand the structure and beliefs of the organizations they are investigating, while also providing evidence that can be used to track supply networks and identify additional conspirators. The deployment of inquisitorial stormtroopers represents the Inquisition's primary military asset for conducting field operations that require precision, reliability, and absolute discretion. These elite soldiers are recruited from the finest graduates of the Schola Progenium and other imperial military academies, selected not only for their combat abilities, but also for their mental fortitude and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. Unlike regular Imperial Guard units, inquisitorial stormtroopers receive specialized training in urban warfare, close quarters combat, and the handling of exotic weapons and equipment. The training regimen for inquisitorial stormtroopers is both physically and psychologically demanding, designed to prepare them for the unique challenges of fighting enemies that may not follow the normal rules of warfare. They learn to operate in environments contaminated by chaos energies, where reality itself may be unstable and conventional tactics may prove ineffective. Psychological conditioning helps them maintain their sanity when confronted with demonic entities, alien horrors, or the worst excesses of human corruption. Many stormtroopers undergo hypno-conditioning to enhance their resistance to psychic influence and ensure their loyalty even under extreme duress. The equipment issued to inquisitorial stormtroopers reflects their specialized role and the resources available to the Inquisition. Standard issue Hellguns provide superior firepower and reliability compared to the lasguns used by regular Imperial Guard forces, while specialized ammunition types allow them to engage a wide variety of targets effectively. Carapace armor offers protection against both conventional weapons and some forms of psychic attack, while integrated communication systems allow for precise coordination during complex operations. Specialized stormtrooper units receive additional training and equipment tailored to specific types of operations. Breacher teams are equipped with melta-charges, power weapons, and heavy armor for assaulting fortified positions or breaking through barriers enhanced by alien technology. Sniper teams use long-range weapons and advanced targeting systems to eliminate specific targets while minimizing collateral damage. Reconnaissance units employ stealth equipment and enhanced sensors to gather intelligence in hostile territory without alerting enemy forces to their presence. The relationship between inquisitorial stormtroopers and the inquisitors they serve is built on mutual respect and shared dedication to the Emperor's will. Unlike regular military units that operate under strict hierarchical command structures, stormtroopers often work closely with their inquisitors in small teams, where individual initiative and adaptability are more important than rigid adherence to doctrine. This close working relationship allows for rapid response to changing tactical situations and ensures that military operations remain aligned with investigative objectives. Arbitrators represent another crucial component of the Inquisition's investigative apparatus, bringing their expertise in law enforcement and criminal investigation to bear on cases that involve violations of imperial law. These officers of the Adeptus Arbites possess extensive knowledge of imperial legal codes, investigative procedures, and the administrative systems that govern the Imperium. Their involvement in inquisitorial investigations often proves essential when dealing with corruption that involves multiple levels of imperial bureaucracy, or when legal proceedings are required to legitimize actions taken against powerful individuals. The collaboration between inquisitors and arbitrators requires careful coordination to ensure that both organizations' objectives are met while maintaining the security necessary for sensitive investigations. Arbitrators bring procedural expertise and legal authority that can be crucial when gathering evidence that must stand up to scrutiny from other imperial institutions. Their knowledge of administrative systems and bureaucratic procedures often proves invaluable when tracking paper trails or identifying patterns of corruption within imperial governmental structures. The deployment of arbitrators in inquisitorial operations must be carefully managed to avoid compromising the investigation's security while taking advantage of their specialized capabilities. Some operations benefit from the arbitrator's official authority and recognized jurisdiction, allowing them to conduct interviews and gather evidence without arousing the suspicion that might be triggered by unknown inquisitorial agents. Other cases, the involvement of arbitrators must be concealed to prevent targets from realizing they are under investigation by higher authorities. Specialized agents recruited from various imperial institutions provide the Inquisition with access to expertise and capabilities that would be difficult to develop internally. Tech adepts from the Adeptus Mechanicus bring knowledge of advanced technology and the ability to analyze alien devices or heretical modifications to imperial equipment. Sanctioned psykers provide psychic capabilities essential for detecting warp taint and conducting telepathic investigations. Medical personnel offer expertise in analyzing biological evidence and treating injuries sustained during dangerous operations. The integration of these diverse specialists into inquisitorial operations requires careful management to ensure that their unique capabilities are utilized effectively while maintaining operational security. Each type of specialist brings their own institutional loyalties and operational procedures that must be reconciled with inquisitorial methods and objectives. The most successful operations involve careful coordination between different types of specialists, allowing each to contribute their expertise while supporting the overall investigative goals. The military capabilities of the Holy Inquisition represent one of the most formidable and diverse arrays of combat assets available to any imperial institution. Unlike the standardized forces of the Astra Militarum or the specialized nature of Space Marine chapters, the Inquisition's military resources are deliberately varied and adaptable, reflecting the organization's need to respond to threats that can range from subtle infiltration to full-scale demonic incursions. The foundation of this military capability rests upon the elite forces known as Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, now more commonly designated as Tempestus Scions when operating under Inquisitorial command. The Tempestus Scions who serve the Inquisition represent the absolute pinnacle of human military excellence, selected from the finest graduates of the Schola Progenium and subjected to training regimens that surpass even those of standard stormtrooper units. These warriors are not merely soldiers, but surgical instruments of the Emperor's will, capable of operating in environments and against enemies that would break lesser men. Their recruitment process begins in the orphanages and training facilities of the Schola Progenium, where promising candidates are identified through a combination of physical prowess, mental acuity, and psychological resilience. The selection criteria for Inquisitorial Tempestus Scions extend far beyond conventional military qualifications. Candidates must demonstrate not only exceptional combat skills, but also the mental fortitude necessary to confront the most horrific enemies of humanity without succumbing to madness or corruption. Psychological evaluations probe for signs of weakness or susceptibility to chaos influence, while genetic screening ensures that candidates possess the physical resilience necessary to survive exposure to exotic environments and alien toxins. The mortality rate during selection is deliberately high, as the Inquisition requires absolute certainty that those who pass will never falter in their duty. Training for Inquisitorial Tempestus Scions incorporates elements that would be considered heretical or dangerous if applied to regular Imperial forces. They learn to recognize the signs of demonic possession, to operate in environments saturated with warp energy, and to maintain their sanity when confronted with horrors that defy rational explanation. Combat training emphasizes close quarters fighting in urban environments, as many inquisitorial operations take place in hive cities or other densely populated areas where collateral damage must be minimized. They master the use of specialized weapons designed to combat specific types of enemies, from blessed ammunition effective against demonic entities to exotic toxins that can neutralize alien physiology. The psychological conditioning of Inquisitorial Tempestus Scions represents one of the most intensive programs of mental preparation in the Imperium. Through a combination of hypno-conditioning, chemical therapy, and carefully controlled exposure to corrupting influences, these warriors develop resistance to psychic attack, mind control, and the fear-inducing presence of supernatural enemies. Many undergo partial memory modification to compartmentalize sensitive information, ensuring that even if captured and subjected to interrogation, they cannot reveal details that might compromise ongoing operations. The equipment issued to Inquisitorial Tempestus Scions reflects both their elite status and the unique challenges they face. Their Hellguns are masterwork weapons, individually crafted and blessed by tech adepts to ensure reliability under extreme conditions. The power cells are specially modified to provide consistent performance even in environments where conventional technology might fail due to psychic interference or alien influence. Specialized ammunition types include sanctified rounds blessed by ecclesiarchy priests, silver-tipped bullets effective against certain types of demons, and exotic penetrator rounds capable of defeating advanced alien armor. Carapace armor worn by Inquisitorial Tempestus Scions incorporates defensive systems beyond those found in standard military equipment. Psychic dampening fields woven into the armor's structure provide protection against mental attacks and possession attempts. Environmental seals protect against biological and chemical weapons, while integrated medical systems can automatically administer combat stimulants or antidotes when sensors detect exposure to toxins. Communication systems are heavily encrypted and include backup Vox channels that operate on frequencies reserved exclusively for inquisitorial use. The deployment of inquisitorial Tempestus scions follows patterns that maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to unnecessary risks. These elite warriors are typically organized into small, highly mobile units that can respond rapidly to emerging threats or support ongoing investigations. Squad sizes rarely exceed 10 individuals, as larger formations would be difficult to deploy covertly and might attract unwanted attention from enemy forces. Each squad is trained to operate independently for extended periods, carrying sufficient supplies and equipment to sustain operations in hostile territory without external support. Specialized roles within inquisitorial Tempestus scion units reflect the diverse nature of threats they must be prepared to confront. Breach specialists carry melta charges and power weapons for breaking through fortified positions or barriers enhanced by alien technology. Marksmen are equipped with long-range weapons and advanced targeting systems, capable of eliminating specific targets with surgical precision. Communications specialists maintain contact with their Inquisitor and coordinate with other Imperial forces when joint operations are required. Medical specialists receive training in treating injuries caused by exotic weapons and exposure to corrupting influences. The authority to requisition Imperial Guard regiments represents one of the most significant military powers available to the Inquisition, allowing individual inquisitors to commandeer entire armies when the scale of a threat requires massive military intervention. This authority extends to all branches of the Imperial military, from basic infantry regiments to specialized armor formations, and even elite units such as Death Corps of Krieg siege regiments or Cadian shock troops. The process of requisitioning these forces requires careful consideration of both operational needs and the political consequences of removing military assets from their assigned duties. When requisitioning Imperial Guard forces, Inquisitors must balance the immediate needs of their investigation against the broader strategic requirements of the Imperium. The removal of a regiment from its assigned sector can leave entire worlds vulnerable to attack, while the deployment of unfamiliar forces in sensitive operations can compromise security and effectiveness. Experienced Inquisitors often prefer to work with units that have previous experience supporting inquisitorial operations, as these forces have proven their reliability and discretion under challenging circumstances. The integration of requisitioned Imperial Guard forces into inquisitorial operations requires careful planning and coordination to ensure that conventional military units can operate effectively alongside specialized inquisitorial assets. Regular Imperial Guard soldiers lack the psychological conditioning and specialized training of inquisitorial forces, making them vulnerable to the fear and corruption that often accompany investigations into heretical activities. Inquisitors must carefully control the information provided to requisitioned forces, revealing only what is necessary for them to complete their assigned tasks while protecting them from knowledge that might prove dangerous or corrupting. The deployment of requisitioned forces often involves modification of standard Imperial Guard equipment and procedures to address the unique challenges of inquisitorial operations. Weapons may be blessed by ecclesiarchy priests or modified with specialized ammunition effective against specific types of enemies. Communication protocols are adjusted to prevent interception by hostile forces, while medical procedures are enhanced to address injuries caused by exotic weapons or exposure to alien toxins. The most sensitive operations may require the complete isolation of requisitioned forces from their normal command structures to prevent security breaches. Space Marine forces represent the most powerful military asset available to the Inquisition, though their deployment requires careful negotiation and coordination with chapter leadership. The relationship between the Inquisition and the Adeptus Astartes is complex, built on mutual respect and shared dedication to the Emperor's will, while acknowledging the independence and proud traditions of the Space Marine chapters. Most chapters maintain cordial relationships with the Inquisition and will provide support when requested, though they expect to be treated as allies rather than subordinates. The Grey Knights chapter maintains the closest relationship with the Inquisition, specifically with the Ordo Malleus, serving as the primary military force for combating demonic threats. This partnership extends beyond simple military cooperation to include shared intelligence, coordinated training exercises, and joint development of specialized equipment and tactics. Grey Knight strike forces are often deployed in support of inquisitorial operations against chaos cults, demonic incursions, and other warp-related threats, bringing their unique combination of psychic abilities and combat expertise to bear against enemies that conventional forces cannot effectively engage. The deployment of Grey Knights alongside inquisitorial forces requires careful coordination to maximize the effectiveness of both organizations' capabilities. Grey Knights operate according to their own tactical doctrines and command structures, while Inquisitors bring intelligence networks and investigative capabilities that can identify targets and coordinate broader strategic responses. Joint operations typically involve the Inquisition providing intelligence and logistical support, while the Grey Knights handle direct combat operations against the most dangerous enemies. Other Space Marine chapters may provide support to inquisitorial operations based on their own traditions and relationships with individual Inquisitors. The Death Watch, the specialized chapter dedicated to combating alien threats, often works closely with the Ordo Xenos on operations against Xenos infiltration or invasion. Individual chapters may have historical relationships with specific Inquisitors or inquisitorial facilities, leading to informal agreements for mutual support and cooperation. These relationships are typically built over decades or centuries of successful collaboration and mutual respect. The requisitioning of Imperial Navy assets provides the Inquisition with the mobility and firepower necessary to respond to threats across the vast distances of the galaxy. Naval vessels serve not only as transportation, but also as mobile command centers, orbital fire support platforms, and secure facilities for conducting sensitive operations. The authority to commandeer Navy ships extends from small patrol vessels suitable for covert operations to massive battleships capable of devastating entire worlds if necessary to prevent the spread of corruption. The selection of appropriate naval assets depends on the specific requirements of each operation and the level of threat being addressed. Fast attack craft and escorts provide the speed and maneuverability necessary for rapid response to emerging threats, while their relatively small crews reduce the risk of security breaches. Cruisers offer a balance of firepower, defensive capability, and internal space for conducting complex operations requiring multiple specialists and extensive equipment. Battleships and other capital ships are typically reserved for the most serious threats, where their massive firepower and heavily armored hulls provide the capability to engage enemies that smaller vessels cannot hope to defeat. The integration of inquisitorial operations with naval assets requires careful coordination between the Inquisition and ship commanders, who must balance their loyalty to the Emperor with their responsibilities to their vessels and crews. Naval officers are trained to follow orders without question, but they also have practical concerns about the safety of their ships and the welfare of their crews. Inquisitors must provide sufficient information to ensure effective cooperation while protecting sensitive operational details that might compromise security if revealed to large numbers of personnel. Personal retinues represent the most intimate and trusted military assets available to individual Inquisitors, composed of specialists who have proven their loyalty and effectiveness through years of service. These retinues are carefully assembled over time, with each member selected for their unique capabilities and absolute dedication to their Inquisitor's mission. The composition of a retinue reflects both the Inquisitor's personal preferences and the specific types of threats they most commonly encounter, creating highly specialized teams capable of addressing a wide range of challenges. Death Cult assassins represent one of the most feared and effective components of many inquisitorial retinues, bringing their fanatical devotion and lethal skills to bear against enemies of the Emperor. These warriors are recruited from the death cults that exist throughout the Imperium, religious organizations that worship the Emperor in his aspect as the bringer of death to his enemies. Death Cult assassins undergo intensive training in multiple forms of combat, mastering both ranged and close-quarters weapons while developing the acrobatic abilities necessary to navigate complex battlefield environments. The psychological conditioning of Death Cult assassins makes them ideal servants for inquisitors who require utterly reliable and ruthless operatives. Their religious devotion provides immunity to most forms of corruption or temptation, while their training in meditation and mental discipline helps them maintain focus even under extreme stress. They view their service to an inquisitor as a sacred duty, an opportunity to serve the emperor directly by eliminating his enemies. This fanatical loyalty makes them willing to undertake missions that would be considered suicidal by conventional standards. The equipment used by Death Cult assassins emphasizes speed, stealth, and lethality over protection or versatility. Neural shredders and power weapons allow them to eliminate targets quickly and quietly, while their lightweight armor provides mobility without sacrificing essential protection. Many Death Cult assassins prefer traditional weapons such as swords and daggers, viewing the personal nature of close combat as more spiritually satisfying than ranged killing. Their weapons are often blessed by ecclesiarchy priests and inscribed with sacred texts, transforming them into religious artifacts as well as instruments of death. Crusaders serve as the defensive backbone of many inquisitorial retinues, providing protection for their inquisitor and other members of the team during dangerous operations. These warriors are recruited from various imperial military organizations, selected for their defensive skills and unwavering loyalty to the emperor. Unlike Death Cult assassins, who specialize in offense, Crusaders focus on protection and survival, using their shields and armor to create defensive positions that can withstand enemy attacks while allowing their allies to complete their missions. The training of Crusaders emphasizes defensive tactics, crowd control, and the protection of vulnerable assets in hostile environments. They learn to coordinate their movements with other members of the retinue, creating overlapping fields of fire and defensive positions that maximize the team's overall effectiveness. Their psychological conditioning focuses on patience and endurance rather than aggressive action, preparing them to maintain their positions even under sustained enemy attack. Many Crusaders undergo additional training in first aid and field medicine, allowing them to provide medical support to wounded team members during extended operations. The distinctive power armor and storm shields used by Crusaders provide exceptional protection against both conventional weapons and exotic attacks. The armor incorporates blessed components and protective wards that offer some defense against psychic attacks and demonic influence. Storm shields generate protective energy fields that can deflect incoming fire while providing cover for other team members. The combination of advanced technology and sacred blessings makes Crusaders nearly impervious to most forms of attack, allowing them to advance into hostile territory and establish secure positions for their allies. Acolytes within personal retinues serve as the intelligence gathering and support backbone of inquisitorial operations, providing the research capabilities, technical expertise, and administrative support necessary for complex investigations. These individuals are recruited from various imperial institutions based on their specialized knowledge and demonstrated loyalty, creating diverse teams that can address multiple aspects of an investigation simultaneously. The relationship between acolytes and their inquisitor is built on mutual trust and shared dedication to uncovering the truth, regardless of the personal cost. The specializations found among acolytes reflect the diverse nature of threats facing the Inquisition and the complex skills required to investigate them effectively. Some acolytes specialize in research and analysis, spending their time in libraries and archives uncovering historical patterns and precedents that might provide insight into current investigations. Others focus on technical skills, maintaining and operating the sophisticated equipment used in inquisitorial operations. Still others serve as liaisons with other imperial institutions, using their knowledge of bureaucratic procedures and personal relationships to gather information and coordinate support. The training of acolytes is less standardized than that of military specialists, reflecting the diverse backgrounds and specializations represented within this category. All acolytes receive basic instruction in recognizing signs of corruption and maintaining operational security, but their specific training depends on their intended role within the retinue. Research specialists learn to navigate the complex archives and libraries of the Imperium, while technical specialists receive training in the maintenance and operation of specialized equipment. The most important aspect of acolyte training is psychological conditioning, designed to help them maintain their sanity and loyalty when exposed to the horrors uncovered during inquisitorial investigations. Inquisitorial vehicles represent a crucial component of the organization's operational capability, providing the mobility, protection, and firepower necessary to conduct effective field operations. The selection and configuration of vehicles depends on the specific requirements of each mission and the preferences of individual inquisitors, creating a diverse fleet that can address a wide range of operational challenges. Unlike the standardized vehicles used by other imperial military organizations, inquisitorial vehicles are often heavily modified or custom-built to address specific operational requirements. Rhino armored personnel carriers serve as the backbone of many inquisitorial motor pools, providing reliable transportation for small teams operating in hostile territory. These vehicles are extensively modified from their standard Space Marine configuration, incorporating additional armor plating, enhanced communication systems, and specialized equipment bays for carrying investigation gear. The crew compartments are often reconfigured to accommodate the diverse equipment requirements of inquisitorial operations, with custom storage solutions for weapons, surveillance gear, and scientific instruments. The defensive systems of inquisitorial rhinos are enhanced beyond military standards to address the unique threats encountered during investigations. Additional armor plating provides protection against exotic weapons and alien technology, while psychic dampening fields help shield occupants from mental attacks. Environmental seals protect against biological and chemical weapons, while enhanced filtration systems can operate in atmospheres contaminated by industrial pollutants or alien toxins. Emergency medical facilities allow for treatment of injuries sustained during operations, while secure communication systems maintain contact with other team members and supporting assets. Land raiders and other heavy vehicles are deployed when operations require maximum protection and firepower, particularly when investigating threats that might require direct assault on fortified positions. These massive vehicles provide mobile command centers capable of coordinating complex operations while delivering devastating firepower against enemy positions. The internal compartments are reconfigured to accommodate command and control equipment, specialized weapons, and the diverse personnel that make up inquisitorial strike teams. Specialized investigation equipment represents one of the most distinctive aspects of inquisitorial operations, incorporating both advanced imperial technology and carefully preserved archaeotech devices that provide capabilities unavailable through conventional means. This equipment is designed to address the unique challenges of investigating corruption, alien influence, and supernatural phenomena that defy conventional analysis. The development and maintenance of this equipment requires close cooperation with the Adeptus Mechanicus, whose tech adepts provide the technical expertise necessary to keep these sophisticated devices operational. Auspex scanners used by the Inquisition are significantly more advanced than those available to other imperial organizations, incorporating specialized sensors capable of detecting psychic emanations, alien technology, and various forms of corruption. These devices can identify the residual energy signatures left by demonic manifestations, track the movement of individuals through crowded environments, and detect hidden weapons or equipment that might be concealed by conventional means. The most advanced models incorporate limited artificial intelligence systems that can analyze scan results and provide preliminary assessments of potential threats. Gene scanners represent another crucial category of investigation equipment, providing the capability to identify genetic corruption, alien hybridization, and other forms of biological contamination that might indicate heretical activity. These devices can analyze biological samples within minutes, comparing genetic patterns against vast databases of known corruption markers and alien genetic sequences. Portable models allow for field analysis of evidence, while laboratory-grade systems provide detailed analysis capable of identifying even minor genetic modifications or exposure to mutagenic influences. Archaeotech weapons represent the most precious and dangerous equipment available to the Inquisition, incorporating technology from the dark age of technology that provides capabilities far beyond those of conventional Imperial weapons. These devices are irreplaceable artifacts, carefully maintained and used only when absolutely necessary to address threats that cannot be countered through conventional means. The operation of archaeotech weapons requires specialized training and often involves significant risks to the user, as the technology involved is not fully understood even by the most skilled tech adepts. The deployment of archaeotech weapons is carefully controlled and documented, with each use requiring justification and approval from senior inquisitors. These weapons are typically reserved for the most dangerous enemies, such as greater demons or alien entities that possess capabilities beyond those of conventional opponents. The psychological impact of these weapons should not be underestimated, as their obvious technological superiority and devastating effects can demoralize enemies and inspire allies even before their actual capabilities are brought to bear. The Grey Knights stand as the most secretive and specialized force within the Imperium's vast military apparatus, their very existence known only to the highest echelons of Imperial authority and those few who have witnessed their operations firsthand. This chapter of Space Marines represents the ultimate fusion of psychic power, genetic engineering, and martial prowess, created specifically to combat the demonic entities that emerge from the warp to threaten humanity. Their founding during the final years of the Horus Heresy marked one of the most audacious and necessary projects undertaken by Malcador the Sigillite, who recognized that the Imperium would require specialized forces capable of confronting threats that conventional military units could not hope to defeat. The origins of the Grey Knights trace back to the darkest period of the Horus Heresy, when the full extent of chaos corruption within the Space Marine legions became apparent to the Emperor and his closest advisors. Malcador, serving as the Emperor's most trusted lieutenant and the architect of the nascent Inquisition, understood that the Imperium's survival would depend not only on defeating the immediate threat posed by the traitor legions, but also on establishing permanent defenses against future demonic incursions. The horrific scenes witnessed during the siege of Terra, where demons materialized within the Imperial Palace itself, drove home the reality that conventional weapons and tactics were insufficient against entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. Working in absolute secrecy, Malcador began identifying candidates for this new chapter from among the loyalist Space Marines who had demonstrated exceptional resistance to chaos corruption. The selection process was extraordinarily rigorous, as these warriors would need to possess not only the physical capabilities of standard Astartes, but also the psychic potential and mental fortitude necessary to confront demons directly. Many candidates were drawn from the Thousand Sons Legion, specifically those who had remained loyal to the Emperor despite their legion's fall to chaos. Others came from various loyalist legions, chosen for their demonstrated psychic abilities or their exceptional performance in battles against demonic entities. The recruitment of these founding members required careful extraction from their original legions, often under cover of routine transfers or special assignments that would not attract attention from potentially compromised commanders. Malcador employed his extensive network of agents and loyalist officers to identify and retrieve suitable candidates, bringing them to secret facilities on Terra where they could be evaluated and prepared for their new role. The process was necessarily slow and methodical, as any hint of the project's existence might have attracted the attention of chaos forces or traitor agents who would seek to corrupt or destroy the nascent chapter. The genetic modifications applied to the Grey Knights went far beyond the standard Astartes enhancement process, incorporating elements that would make them uniquely resistant to chaos corruption while enhancing their psychic capabilities. The gene seed used in their creation was heavily modified, incorporating genetic material from multiple sources to create a hybrid that combined the best characteristics of different Primarch lineages, while eliminating weaknesses that might make them susceptible to corruption. This process required the collaboration of the Emperor's finest geneticists and the most skilled tech adepts, working under conditions of absolute secrecy to develop techniques that had never been attempted before. The psychic conditioning applied to the Grey Knights during their transformation was perhaps the most crucial aspect of their creation. Unlike other Space Marines, who received basic mental conditioning to resist fear and maintain loyalty, the Grey Knights underwent extensive psychic training designed to strengthen their resistance to demonic influence while enhancing their ability to channel and focus psychic energy. This training incorporated techniques developed by the Emperor himself, drawing upon his vast knowledge of psychic phenomena and the nature of chaos corruption. The process was dangerous and often fatal, as candidates who lacked sufficient psychic potential or mental strength were destroyed by the very forces they were meant to master. The unique gene seed of the Grey Knights incorporates several distinctive characteristics that set them apart from other Space Marine chapters. Their genetic structure includes enhanced psychic organs that allow every member of the chapter to manifest psychic abilities to some degree, though the level of power varies significantly between individuals. The most gifted become powerful battle psykers, capable of manifesting devastating psychic attacks, while others develop more subtle abilities that enhance their combat effectiveness or provide protection against enemy psychic assaults. This universal psychic potential makes the Grey Knights uniquely effective against demonic entities, which rely heavily on psychic energy for their manifestation and continued existence in real space. The physical modifications applied to Grey Knights go beyond standard Astartes enhancement to address the specific challenges of fighting demonic entities. Their nervous systems are reinforced with additional psychic conductive materials that allow them to channel and focus psychic energy more effectively, while protecting them from the feedback effects that can occur when engaging powerful demonic entities. Their bones are strengthened with blessed materials that provide some protection against demonic weapons, while their blood is treated with sanctified compounds that make them toxic to certain types of demons. These modifications are maintained through regular ritual purification ceremonies that combine physical treatment with psychic cleansing techniques. The incorruptible nature of the Grey Knights represents their most remarkable characteristic and the feature that makes them uniquely valuable in the fight against chaos. Unlike other Space Marines, who can potentially fall to corruption despite their conditioning and genetic modifications, the Grey Knights possess an inherent resistance to chaos influence that approaches absolute immunity. This resistance stems from a combination of their unique gene seed, their extensive psychic conditioning, and the constant reinforcement of their mental defenses through ritual practice and meditation. The exact mechanisms behind this immunity are not fully understood even by the Grey Knights themselves, but its effectiveness has been proven through centuries of combat against the most powerful demonic entities. This incorruptible nature extends beyond simple resistance to direct corruption, attempts to encompass protection against the more subtle forms of chaos influence that can affect even the most loyal servants of the Emperor. Grey Knights do not experience the gradual erosion of moral standards that can occur when individuals are repeatedly exposed to the horrors of chaos, nor do they suffer from the psychological trauma that often accompanies prolonged exposure to demonic entities. Their minds remain clear and focused even in the presence of greater demons, whose very existence can drive lesser beings to madness or despair. The fortress monastery of the Grey Knights on Titan, one of Saturn's moons, represents one of the most heavily fortified and secretive installations in the entire Imperium. The choice of Titan as their base of operations was deliberate, as the moon's location within the Sol system provides both security and symbolic significance, while offering practical advantages for their operations. The facility is built into the moon's surface and extends deep underground, creating a complex that is virtually impregnable to conventional assault, while providing the specialized facilities necessary for training and equipping the chapter's unique warriors. The construction of the Titan facility required the collaboration of the finest architects and engineers available to the Imperium, working under conditions of absolute secrecy to create an installation that could serve as both fortress and monastery. The complex incorporates multiple layers of physical and psychic defenses, including blessed barriers that can repel demonic entities and sophisticated detection systems that can identify chaos corruption at the molecular level. The facility's power systems are shielded against psychic interference, while its communication arrays are protected by encryption methods that make interception virtually impossible. The training facilities within the Titan complex are designed to prepare Grey Knights for the unique challenges they will face in combat against demonic entities. Combat chambers can simulate the psychic distortions and reality warping effects that occur during demonic manifestations, allowing warriors to practice their techniques under conditions that closely approximate actual combat. Meditation chambers provide environments where Grey Knights can safely explore and develop their psychic abilities without risking corruption or uncontrolled manifestations. The facility also includes extensive libraries containing knowledge about demonic entities, chaos corruption, and the techniques necessary to combat supernatural threats. The secrecy surrounding the Grey Knight's existence extends to elaborate protocols designed to prevent knowledge of their operations from spreading throughout the Imperium. These protocols recognize that the very existence of specialized anti-demon forces might cause panic among Imperial citizens, or provide useful intelligence to chaos forces seeking to understand Imperial capabilities. The measures taken to maintain this secrecy are extreme and often controversial, reflecting the organization's belief that the security benefits outweigh the moral costs of the actions required. The practice of mind-wiping Imperial forces who witness Grey Knight's operations represents one of the most controversial aspects of their operational procedures. When Grey Knights deploy alongside conventional Imperial forces, elaborate measures are taken to ensure that surviving personnel have no memory of the specialized Space Marines or their capabilities. This process typically involves the use of psychic techniques to selectively remove specific memories, while leaving the rest of the individual's personality and knowledge intact. The procedure is performed by specially trained psykers who can distinguish between relevant memories and those that should be preserved. The implementation of mind-wiping protocols requires careful coordination between Grey Knight's forces and the Inquisitors who typically accompany their operations. Inquisitors must identify which personnel have been exposed to classified information and determine the appropriate level of memory modification required. Some individuals may only need minor adjustments to remove specific details about Grey Knight's equipment or tactics, while others who have witnessed extensive operations may require more comprehensive memory modification. The process is not without risks, as excessive memory modification can cause personality changes or cognitive impairment in affected individuals. The moral implications of these secrecy measures have been debated within the highest levels of Imperial authority, with some arguing that the protection of loyal Imperial servants should take precedence over operational security concerns. However, the consensus among those aware of the Grey Knight's existence is that the potential consequences of their capabilities becoming known to chaos forces outweigh the ethical concerns about memory modification. The knowledge that the Imperium possesses specialized anti-demon forces could lead to changes in chaos tactics, or the development of countermeasures that might reduce the Grey Knight's effectiveness. The First War for Armageddon stands as one of the most significant deployments of Grey Knight's forces in Imperial history, demonstrating both their incredible effectiveness against demonic threats and the extreme measures taken to maintain their secrecy. The conflict began when the demon Primarch Angron manifested on Armageddon alongside a massive force of Khorne demons, threatening to turn the strategically important world into a permanent foothold for chaos forces. The scale of the demonic incursion was unprecedented, requiring a coordinated response from multiple Imperial organizations, including the Grey Knights, the Space Wolves, and conventional Imperial Guard forces. The Grey Knights' deployment to Armageddon involved the entire First Brotherhood, led by Supreme Grand Master Jaros, and accompanied by Inquisitor Lord Torquemada Codes. The chapter's forces arrived via specially configured strike cruisers that could penetrate the warp storms surrounding the planet, bringing with them the specialized equipment and weapons necessary to engage greater demons in direct combat. The Grey Knights' initial operations focused on disrupting the ritual sites that were maintaining the demonic manifestations, using their psychic abilities to identify and neutralize the focal points of chaos energy. The climactic battle of the First War for Armageddon saw the Grey Knights engage Angron himself in direct combat, a confrontation that tested their abilities against one of the most powerful entities in the Chaos Pantheon. The battle required the combined efforts of multiple Grey Knight squads working in coordination, using their force weapons and psychic abilities to weaken the Demon Primarch while avoiding his devastating attacks. The conflict raged across multiple locations on Armageddon's surface, with the Grey Knights pursuing Angron through industrial complexes and hive cities, while coordinating with other Imperial forces to contain the broader demonic incursion. The successful banishment of Angron and the defeat of his demonic host represented a tremendous victory for Imperial forces, but it came at a significant cost in terms of maintaining the Grey Knight's secrecy. Thousands of Imperial Guard soldiers and Space Wolves had witnessed the Grey Knights in action, observing their distinctive armor, specialized weapons, and psychic abilities. The decision to implement comprehensive memory modification protocols for all surviving personnel created significant tension between the Inquisition and the Space Wolves, who objected to the treatment of their battle brothers, and the Imperial Guard forces who had fought alongside them. The aftermath of the First War for Armageddon led to a period of conflict known as the Months of Shame, during which the Space Wolves openly opposed the Inquisition's attempts to implement secrecy protocols. The Space Wolves' resistance to memory modification created a significant crisis for the Inquisition, as their defiance threatened to expose the Grey Knight's existence to a much wider audience. The conflict escalated when the Space Wolves refused to allow inquisitorial forces to process their personnel, leading to a series of confrontations that brought the two organizations to the brink of open warfare. The Months of Shame saw several direct confrontations between Space Wolves and inquisitorial forces, including Grey Knights units that found themselves in the unprecedented position of potentially fighting against other loyal Space Marines. The conflict reached its peak when the Space Wolves' Great Wolf Logan Grimnar personally confronted Inquisitor Lord Codes, demanding an end to the persecution of Imperial Guard survivors and the abandonment of the memory modification protocols. The confrontation nearly resulted in direct combat between the two leaders, prevented only by the intervention of other senior Imperial officials who recognized the catastrophic consequences that would result from open warfare between loyal Imperial forces. The resolution of the Months of Shame required careful negotiation and compromise from all parties involved, with the Inquisition ultimately agreeing to modified secrecy protocols that took into account the Space Wolves' concerns about the treatment of loyal Imperial servants. The agreement established new procedures for handling future operations involving multiple Imperial organizations, including protocols for information sharing and coordination that would reduce the need for comprehensive memory modification. However, the fundamental principle of maintaining the Grey Knight's secrecy remained intact, with the understanding that some level of memory modification would continue to be necessary for operational security. The Grey Knight's role in major demonic incursions extends far beyond their participation in the Armageddon campaign, encompassing countless operations against chaos forces throughout the galaxy. Their unique capabilities make them the primary response force for situations involving greater demon manifestations, chaos space marine sorcerers, and large-scale ritual activities that threaten to create permanent breaches between real space and the warp. The chapter maintains rapid response capabilities that allow them to deploy to threatened locations within days or weeks of receiving intelligence about emerging demonic threats. The coordination between Grey Knight's forces and the Ordo Malleus represents one of the most effective partnerships in the Imperial military structure, combining the Inquisition's intelligence-gathering capabilities with the chapter's specialized combat abilities. Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus often embed with Grey Knight's strike forces, providing tactical intelligence and coordinating with other Imperial forces, while the Space Marines focus on direct combat operations. This partnership has proven essential for addressing complex threats that require both investigative expertise and specialized military capabilities. The Grey Knight's operations against demonic incursions typically follow established patterns that maximize their effectiveness while minimizing the risk of casualties or mission failure. Initial deployment involves rapid insertion of reconnaissance forces that can assess the scale and nature of the demonic threat, identifying key targets and determining the appropriate level of response required. Strike forces are then deployed to neutralize priority targets such as demon princes, greater demons, or the ritual sites that maintain demonic manifestations. The final phase involves systematic elimination of remaining demonic forces and the purification of affected areas to prevent future manifestations. The specialized equipment and weapons used by the Grey Knights reflect their unique role and the specific challenges of fighting demonic entities. Their force weapons incorporate blessed materials and psychic-focusing crystals that allow them to channel and amplify psychic energy, creating weapons that are particularly effective against entities that exist partially outside normal space-time. Storm bolters are loaded with sanctified ammunition that can disrupt demonic manifestations, while their Terminator armor incorporates psychic dampening fields that provide protection against demonic attacks. The chapter also maintains stocks of specialized equipment, such as incinerators loaded with blessed promethium and psycannons that fire psychically charged projectiles. The recruitment and training of new Grey Knights follows procedures that are even more rigorous than those used by other Space Marine chapters, reflecting the extraordinary requirements for service in this specialized force. Potential recruits are identified through extensive screening processes that evaluate not only physical and mental capabilities, but also psychic potential and resistance to corruption. The transformation process incorporates unique genetic modifications and psychic conditioning that can take years to complete, with many candidates failing to survive the procedures or proving unsuitable for the chapter's requirements. The ongoing operations of the Grey Knights continue to evolve as new threats emerge, and the nature of chaos corruption changes over time. The chapter maintains extensive research programs focused on understanding demonic entities and developing new techniques for combating them, working closely with the Ordo Malleus and other Imperial institutions to stay ahead of emerging threats. Their role as the Imperium's primary defense against demonic incursions ensures that they will remain one of the most crucial and secretive forces in the ongoing struggle against the forces of chaos. The origins of what would become the Adeptus trace back to one of the most turbulent periods in Imperial history, when the very foundations of the Emperor's realm were shaken by corruption from within rather than conquest from without. The organization that would eventually serve as the militant arm of the Ordo Hereticus began as the Daughters of the Emperor, a religious order founded by the charismatic preacher Goge Vandar during his rise to power in the 36th millennium. Vandar, who would eventually become one of the most reviled figures in Imperial history, initially presented himself as a reformer dedicated to purifying the Imperium's bloated bureaucracy and restoring the Emperor's true vision for humanity. The Daughters of the Emperor emerged from the convent prioress on Ophelia 7, a world that had become a center of religious fervor and militant devotion to the Emperor's worship. The order attracted women from across the Imperium who sought to serve the Emperor through direct action rather than passive prayer, drawing recruits from noble houses, hive city gangs, and even former Imperial Guard veterans who had been discharged from service. These women underwent rigorous training that combined religious indoctrination with military discipline, creating warriors who viewed combat as a form of worship and death in service to the emperor as the highest possible achievement. Under Vander's patronage, the daughters of the emperor grew rapidly in both size and influence, establishing convents throughout the Imperium and recruiting thousands of women who were drawn to their combination of religious devotion and martial prowess. The Order's members were distinguished by their distinctive power armor, painted in the deep red and black colors that would later become associated with the Order's militant, and their use of weapons that incorporated religious iconography and blessed components. Their training emphasized close-quarters combat and the use of flame weapons, reflecting their role as purifiers who would cleanse the Imperium of heresy through fire and faith. The transformation of the daughters of the Emperor into the Adeptus sororitas occurred during the catastrophic events of the Age of Apostasy, when Vander's true nature was revealed, and his reign of terror brought the Imperium to the brink of civil war. Vander had gradually accumulated power through a combination of political maneuvering, religious manipulation, and the strategic use of the daughters of the Emperor as his personal army. His control over both the Adeptus Ministorum and the Adeptus Administratum gave him unprecedented authority over the Imperium's civilian government, while the fanatical loyalty of the daughters provided him with military force that could enforce his will even against other imperial institutions. The corruption of Vander's regime became increasingly apparent as his paranoia and megalomania grew unchecked. He ordered the construction of massive monuments to his own glory, diverted imperial resources to fund his personal projects, and used the daughters of the emperor to eliminate anyone who opposed his rule. The Order's members, convinced that they were serving the emperor's will through their obedience to his chosen representative, carried out increasingly brutal campaigns against planetary governors, military commanders, and even space marine chapters that questioned Vander's authority. The sight of power-armored women bearing flaming weapons and religious banners became synonymous with Vander's oppression throughout the Imperium. The downfall of Vander and the redemption of the daughters of the Emperor came through the intervention of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians, who had remained largely inactive since the end of the Horus Heresy. Led by Captain General Diocletian, a force of custodians infiltrated the imperial palace and confronted the daughters of the emperor with irrefutable evidence of Vander's corruption and betrayal of the emperor's true will. The revelation that they had been manipulated into serving a heretic rather than the emperor himself shattered the faith of many daughters, while others refused to believe the evidence and fought desperately to defend their fallen master. The confrontation between the custodians and the daughters of the emperor within the imperial palace became known as the Brides of the Emperor incident, a series of running battles that raged through the sacred halls where the emperor's body rested upon the golden throne. The daughters fought with desperate fury, their faith in Vander warring with growing doubts about the righteousness of their cause. The custodians, meanwhile, sought to minimize casualties while demonstrating the truth of Vander's corruption through their actions and words. The conflict reached its climax when the daughters' leader, Alicia Dominica, was brought before the Golden Throne itself and experienced a vision that revealed the Emperor's true will. The vision granted to Dominica and her companions fundamentally transformed their understanding of their purpose and their relationship to the Emperor. Rather than serving as the instruments of any mortal authority, they were called to serve the Emperor directly as his daughters in spirit, if not in blood. This revelation led to the formal establishment of the Adeptus sororitas, with the former daughters of the Emperor reorganizing themselves into the Order's militant that would serve as the chamber militant of the Ordo Hereticus. The transformation was not merely organizational but spiritual, as the sisters embraced a new understanding of their role as the Emperor's instruments for purging heresy from within the Imperium. The relationship between the Order's militant and the Ordo Hereticus developed organically from their shared mission of identifying and eliminating internal threats to the Imperium. Unlike the partnership between the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus, which was established through formal agreements and structured protocols, the cooperation between the sororitas and the Hereticus emerged from practical necessity and mutual respect. Both organizations recognized that the threats they faced required different but complementary capabilities, with the Inquisitors providing investigative expertise and intelligence gathering, while the Sisters offered military force and unwavering faith. The Sisters of Battle proved particularly valuable to the Ordo Hereticus because of their unique combination of military effectiveness and spiritual purity. Their resistance to corruption made them ideal for operations against heretical cults and rogue psykers, while their distinctive appearance and reputation often proved as effective as their weapons in intimidating potential heretics. The sight of power-armored women bearing flaming weapons and chanting hymns of faith became a powerful symbol of imperial authority and divine judgment, capable of inspiring loyalty among the faithful while striking fear into the hearts of heretics. The organizational structure of the Order's militant reflected their dual role as both religious order and military force, with each order maintaining its own traditions, heraldry, and specialized capabilities while remaining unified in their devotion to the Emperor. The Order of the Ebon Chalice, descended from Dominica's original followers, specialized in urban warfare and the purification of corrupted population centers. The Order of the Argent Shroud focused on rapid deployment and strike operations, using their mobility to respond quickly to emerging threats across multiple star systems. The Order of the Sacred Rose emphasized defensive operations and the protection of sacred sites, while the Order of the Valorous Heart specialized in assault operations against fortified heretical strongholds. The training regimens employed by the Order's militant combined physical conditioning, weapons training, and religious instruction in ways that reinforced the Sisters' understanding of combat as a form of worship. Novices underwent years of preparation that included not only the martial skills necessary for battlefield effectiveness, but also extensive theological education that prepared them to recognize and resist various forms of heretical corruption. The process of becoming a full Sister of Battle required demonstration of both combat proficiency and spiritual purity, with candidates undergoing trials that tested their faith as rigorously as their fighting abilities. The distinctive power armor worn by the Sisters of Battle incorporated both advanced protective systems and religious iconography that reflected their dual nature as warriors and worshippers. The armor's design emphasized mobility and protection while incorporating numerous sacred symbols, purity seals, and devotional texts that served both decorative and functional purposes. The integrated systems included enhanced communication arrays, medical monitoring equipment, and environmental protection that allowed the Sisters to operate in hostile conditions while maintaining their effectiveness in combat. The armor's distinctive silhouette, with its emphasis on curves and flowing lines, rather than the angular brutality of Space Marine armor, created an immediately recognizable appearance that became synonymous with imperial religious authority. The acts of faith represent the most remarkable and distinctive aspect of the Adeptus Sororitas, manifestations of divine power that occur when the Sisters' faith reaches sufficient intensity to channel the Emperor's will directly into the material realm. These phenomena defy conventional understanding of physics and psychology, allowing individual Sisters or entire squads to perform feats that would be impossible through purely human effort. The acts of faith are not psychic phenomena in the conventional sense, as they do not rely on warp energy or create the disturbances typically associated with psyker abilities. Instead, they appear to represent direct divine intervention, the Emperor's power flowing through his most devoted servants to accomplish his will. The manifestation of acts of faith varies considerably depending on the circumstances and the specific needs of the Sisters involved. Some acts enhance physical capabilities, allowing Sisters to move with superhuman speed, strike with devastating force, or endure injuries that would incapacitate normal humans. Others provide protection against enemy attacks, creating barriers of faith that can deflect bullets, absorb energy blasts, or even provide immunity to the corrupting influence of chaos entities. The most dramatic acts of faith can resurrect fallen Sisters, restore damaged equipment, or create devastating attacks that channel the Emperor's wrath against his enemies. The conditions required for acts of faith to manifest are not fully understood even by the sisters themselves, though certain patterns have been observed over centuries of warfare. The phenomena typically occur during moments of extreme devotion, when the sisters' faith is focused and purified through combat, prayer, or the witnessing of miraculous events. The presence of sacred relics, the recitation of specific prayers, or the performance of ritual acts can increase the likelihood of manifestation, though the acts cannot be summoned at will or controlled through conscious effort. The sisters understand these manifestations as gifts from the Emperor, granted to those who have proven their worthiness through absolute devotion and selfless service. The theological implications of the acts of faith have been debated extensively within the ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition, with various interpretations proposed to explain their nature and significance. Some scholars view them as evidence of the Emperor's continued active presence in the material realm, proof that his consciousness persists despite his physical confinement upon the Golden Throne. Others suggest that the acts represent the culmination of human faith and devotion, the psychic energy of belief given physical form through the sisters' absolute conviction. The most radical interpretations propose that the acts of faith demonstrate the Emperor's transition from mortality to true divinity, his power growing stronger as more of humanity embraces his worship. The practical applications of acts of faith in combat have made the Sisters of Battle invaluable assets for operations against enemies that rely on supernatural abilities or corrupting influence. The divine protection provided by these manifestations can neutralize psychic attacks, resist demonic possession, and even provide immunity to the fear-inducing presence of greater demons. The offensive capabilities granted by acts of faith can destroy enemies that are resistant to conventional weapons, while the healing and resurrection aspects can maintain unit cohesion even under the most devastating enemy attacks. The unpredictable nature of these manifestations adds an element of divine intervention to battles involving the sisters, often turning the tide of combat in ways that confound enemy commanders. The Siege of Vrax stands as one of the most significant campaigns in which the Adeptus served alongside the Ordo Hereticus, demonstrating both their military capabilities and their effectiveness in combating large-scale heretical movements. The conflict began when the planetary governor of Vrax Prime, Cardinal Zaffin, declared independence from the Imperium and established a heretical regime that combined elements of chaos worship with perverted imperial doctrine. The scale of the rebellion and the involvement of traitor Space Marines required a massive imperial response that included multiple orders militant working in coordination with inquisitorial forces. The Sisters of Battle deployed to Vrax faced challenges that tested every aspect of their training and faith, as the heretical forces had corrupted much of the planet's population and established extensive defensive networks throughout the hive cities and industrial complexes. The urban warfare that characterized much of the campaign played to the Sisters' strengths, as their training in close-quarters combat and their resistance to corruption made them ideal for clearing contaminated areas and eliminating heretical cultists. The distinctive roar of their flamer weapons and the sight of their power armor advancing through smoke-filled corridors became symbols of imperial determination throughout the long siege. The purification of St. Josmain's Hope, a massive cathedral complex that had been corrupted by chaos rituals, represented one of the most challenging operations undertaken by the Sisters during the Vrax campaign. The cathedral had been transformed into a nexus of heretical activity, with its sacred spaces defiled by blasphemous symbols and its chambers filled with cultists who had undergone various forms of mutation and corruption. The Sisters' assault on the complex required careful coordination between multiple orders, with each bringing their specialized capabilities to bear against different aspects of the heretical stronghold. The Order of the Sacred Rose led the initial assault, their expertise in defensive operations proving crucial for establishing footholds within the cathedral's outer defenses. Their heavy flamers and melta-weapons proved devastatingly effective against the mutated cultists and corrupted servitors that defended the complex, while their disciplined advance through the cathedral's corridors demonstrated the tactical precision that made them so effective in urban combat. The Order's canoness, Sister Superior Myria, coordinated the assault while maintaining constant communication with the inquisitorial forces that were simultaneously conducting their own operations against the heretical leadership. The climactic battle within the cathedral's main sanctuary saw the sisters face off against a corrupted space marine who had been leading the heretical forces, a confrontation that tested their faith and combat abilities against one of the Imperium's most dangerous enemies. The traitor marine's power armor and enhanced physiology made him nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons, while his corruption had granted him additional abilities that allowed him to command demonic entities and manipulate the battlefield through supernatural means. The sisters' victory came through a combination of tactical coordination, superior numbers, and the manifestation of acts of faith that allowed them to overcome their enemies' advantages. The purification of Ophelia VII, following a massive heretical uprising, demonstrated the sisters' commitment to protecting their sacred sites, even at tremendous cost to themselves. The world that had served as the birthplace of their order came under attack from a coalition of heretical forces that sought to corrupt the convent prioress and establish a permanent foothold within the heart of Sororita's territory. The defense of Ophelia VII required the deployment of multiple orders militant, with sisters from across the galaxy converging on their sacred world to repel the invaders and purify the contamination they had spread. The battle for the convent prioress itself became a legendary engagement that demonstrated the full extent of the sisters' capabilities when fighting to protect their most sacred locations. The heretical forces had managed to breach the outer defenses and establish positions within the convent's lower levels, forcing the sisters to fight room by room to reclaim their sacred spaces. The close quarters combat that characterized this phase of the battle showcased the sisters' training in urban warfare, as they used their knowledge of the convent's layout to outmaneuver the invaders while coordinating their attacks through prayer and battlefield communication. The manifestation of acts of faith during the battle for Ophelia VII reached unprecedented levels, with entire squads of sisters experiencing divine intervention that allowed them to perform feats that became the stuff of legend throughout the Imperium. Sisters who had fallen in battle rose again to continue fighting, their wounds healing through divine power, while their faith burned brighter than ever. Weapons that had been damaged or depleted found their ammunition replenished and their mechanisms restored, while the sisters themselves moved with speed and precision that exceeded normal human capabilities. The cumulative effect of these manifestations created an atmosphere of divine presence that inspired the defenders while terrifying the heretical attackers. The coordination between the Adeptus Sororitas and the Ordo Hereticus during these major campaigns established operational procedures that would serve as templates for future joint operations. Inquisitors learned to work with the sisters' command structure and tactical preferences, while the sisters developed techniques for supporting inquisitorial investigations without compromising their own operational security. The partnership proved particularly effective when dealing with threats that required both investigative expertise and military force, as the Inquisitors could identify and analyze heretical activities, while the sisters provided the combat capability necessary to eliminate the threats once they were located. The protection of sacred sites throughout the Imperium represents one of the most important ongoing missions of the Adeptus Sororitas, as these locations often serve as focal points for heretical activity and targets for enemy forces seeking to strike at the heart of Imperial faith. The sisters maintain permanent garrisons at many of the most important religious sites, from the great cathedrals of cardinal worlds to smaller shrines that commemorate significant events in Imperial history. These garrison forces serve both defensive and offensive roles, protecting the sites from direct attack while also serving as rapid response forces that can deploy to address threats throughout their assigned sectors. The defensive preparations at sacred sites protected by the Adeptus Sororitas incorporate both conventional military fortifications and religious elements that reflect the sisters' understanding of warfare as a form of worship. Gun emplacements and armor positions are integrated with chapels and shrines that that allow the defenders to maintain their spiritual focus while engaging enemy forces. The placement of sacred relics and religious artifacts throughout the defensive networks serves both inspirational and practical purposes, as these items can enhance the manifestation of acts of faith while providing focal points for the sisters' devotions during combat. The ongoing campaigns of the Adepta sororitas in service to the Ordo Hereticus continue to evolve as new threats emerge, and the nature of heretical corruption adapts to imperial countermeasures. The sisters have proven their effectiveness against a wide range of enemies, from simple cultists and rogue psykers to corrupted space marines and even demonic entities that have manifested in the material realm. Their combination of military prowess, spiritual purity, and divine favor makes them uniquely suited to address the internal threats that pose the greatest danger to the Imperium's continued existence, ensuring their continued importance in the ongoing struggle against heresy and corruption. The Death Watch emerged from the crucible of humanity's first major encounters with the myriad alien threats that populated the galaxy, their founding rooted in the harsh realities discovered during the Great Crusade when the Emperor's forces encountered Xenos species, whose capabilities and malevolence exceeded even the most pessimistic projections. Unlike the Grey Knights, who were created in response to the specific threat of chaos corruption revealed during the Horus Heresy, or the Adeptus sororitas, who evolved from existing imperial institutions, the Death Watch represented a deliberate response to the growing understanding that conventional space marine tactics and equipment were insufficient against certain alien threats that defied standard military doctrine. The origins of the Death Watch can be traced to the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, when the surviving loyalist forces began encountering alien species that had expanded into territories previously controlled by the Imperium during the Civil War. The Rangdan xenocides had already demonstrated the devastating potential of certain Xenos species, with entire space marine legions suffering catastrophic losses against enemies whose biological and technological capabilities operated according to principles that imperial science could barely comprehend. The emergence of the Tyranid swarms in later millennia would vindicate these early concerns, but even during the immediate post-heresy period, encounters with advanced Eldar forces and aggressive Orc empires made it clear that specialized anti-Xenos capabilities would be essential for the Imperium's survival. The formal establishment of the Death Watch as the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos occurred during the early centuries of the 32nd millennium, when the nascent Inquisition began to recognize patterns in alien activities that suggested coordinated threats requiring specialized responses. The organization's founding charter, established through cooperation between the Ordo Xenos and representatives from multiple Space Marine chapters, created a unique military force that would draw its members from across the Adeptus Astartes while maintaining its own distinct identity and operational procedures. This approach represented a significant departure from traditional Space Marine organization, as it required individual chapters to contribute their finest warriors to an external organization for extended periods of service. The recruitment process for the Death Watch differs fundamentally from that of other Space Marine organizations, as it draws its members from existing chapters rather than creating new warriors from scratch. This system allows the Death Watch to benefit from the diverse combat experiences, specialized knowledge, and unique capabilities that different chapters have developed over centuries of warfare against various enemies. A Space Marine selected for Death Watch service brings with him not only his individual skills and experience, but also the tactical doctrines, equipment preferences, and cultural traditions of his parent chapter, creating a force that combines the best elements of multiple Astartes lineages. The selection criteria for Death Watch service emphasize combat experience against alien threats, demonstrated tactical flexibility, and the psychological resilience necessary to operate alongside battle brothers from different chapters with potentially conflicting traditions and methods. Many Death Watch recruits are veterans of campaigns against major Xenos threats, having proven their effectiveness in battles against Orc-Waz, Eldar raids, or Tyranid incursions. Others are chosen for their specialized knowledge of particular alien species or their expertise in specific types of warfare that are commonly required in anti-Xenos operations. The most important qualification, however, is the ability to set aside chapter loyalty and pride in service to the greater mission of protecting humanity from alien threats. The process of joining the Death Watch involves a formal ritual of commitment that symbolically separates the Space Marine from his parent chapter, while acknowledging his continued connection to his origins. The warrior's left shoulder pad is painted black and adorned with the distinctive Death Watch insignia, while his right shoulder pad retains the colors and symbols of his parent chapter. This visual representation of dual loyalty reflects the complex nature of Death Watch service, as members must balance their allegiance to the organization with their eventual return to their original chapters. The ritual includes oaths of secrecy regarding Death Watch operations and equipment, as much of what the organization encounters must remain classified to prevent panic or the spread of dangerous knowledge. Watch fortresses serve as the primary operational bases for Death Watch forces throughout the galaxy, strategically positioned to provide rapid response capabilities against alien threats while maintaining the security necessary for housing classified equipment and information. These installations represent some of the most sophisticated military facilities in the Imperium, incorporating advanced detection systems, specialized weapon manufacturing capabilities, and secure storage for xenological specimens and captured alien technology. The fortresses are typically built in systems that provide good astropathic communication links while remaining defensible against potential alien attacks, often utilizing asteroid bases, fortified moons, or heavily defended orbital platforms. The construction of watch fortresses requires collaboration between the Death Watch, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and various other Imperial institutions, as these facilities must accommodate the unique requirements of anti-Xenos operations while maintaining the highest levels of security. The fortresses incorporate multiple layers of physical and electronic defenses, including void shields, orbital defense platforms, and sophisticated sensor arrays capable of detecting alien infiltration attempts. Internal security measures include biometric scanners, psychic detection systems, and automated defense turrets that can respond to various types of alien threats. The facilities also include extensive medical bays equipped to treat injuries caused by exotic alien weapons and exposure to dangerous Xenos biotechnology. Watch Fortress Iriok, located in the Jericho Reach, stands as one of the most significant Death Watch installations, serving as the primary staging area for operations against the numerous alien threats that plague this strategically important region. The fortress occupies a massive asteroid that has been extensively modified and fortified, with its interior chambers carved deep into the rock to provide protection against orbital bombardment and alien attack. The facility's weapon systems include lance batteries, torpedo tubes, and specialized anti-ship weapons designed to engage alien vessels that might attempt to assault the installation. The fortress also serves as a research center where captured alien technology is studied and countermeasures are developed. The strategic importance of Watch Fortress Iriok stems from its location at the nexus of several critical warp routes that provide access to multiple sectors threatened by alien incursions. The fortress serves as a coordination center for Death Watch operations throughout the Jericho Reach, with its communication arrays maintaining contact with kill teams deployed across dozens of systems. The facility's archives contain detailed intelligence reports on alien activities throughout the region, including analysis of Tyranid swarm movements, Orc migration patterns, and Eldar raiding activities. This information proves invaluable for predicting alien movements and coordinating Imperial responses to emerging threats. The Omega Vault within Watch Fortress Iriok represents one of the most mysterious and potentially dangerous facilities operated by the Death Watch, housing artifacts and specimens that are considered too dangerous for study by conventional Imperial institutions. The vault's contents include captured alien weapons, biological samples from unknown xeno species, and technological devices whose functions remain incomprehensible to Imperial science. Access to the vault is strictly controlled, with only the highest-ranking Deathwatch officers and selected Ordo Xenos Inquisitors permitted to examine its contents. The security measures protecting the vault include multiple layers of physical barriers, psychic wards, and automated defense systems that can eliminate intruders or contain escaped specimens. The specialized equipment developed by the Deathwatch reflects their unique mission requirements and the diverse nature of alien threats they encounter. Standard Deathwatch weapons are modified versions of conventional Space Marine equipment, enhanced with specialized ammunition types and targeting systems designed to be effective against specific categories of alien enemies. Bolters are equipped with a variety of specialized rounds, including Dragonfire bolts for use against swarm organisms, Hellfire rounds designed to penetrate alien armor, and Kraken penetrator rounds for engaging heavily armored targets. These ammunition types are carefully matched to specific alien threats based on intelligence gathered from previous encounters and ongoing research into alien physiology and technology. The distinctive Stalker pattern bolter used by many Deathwatch operatives incorporates advanced targeting systems and sound suppression technology that makes it ideal for covert operations against alien infiltrators. The weapon's integrated scope provides enhanced targeting capabilities, while its modified firing mechanism reduces the distinctive sound signature that might alert alien enemies to the presence of Imperial forces. The bolter's ammunition feed system can accommodate multiple types of specialized rounds, allowing the operator to select the most appropriate ammunition for each target without the need to reload or change weapons. Deathwatch heavy weapons include several unique variants designed specifically for anti-Xenos operations, most notably the frag cannon, which can fire either a widespread blast of shrapnel effective against swarm organisms or a concentrated slug for engaging heavily armored targets. The weapon's versatility makes it invaluable in operations where the nature of alien opposition cannot be predicted in advance, allowing Deathwatch teams to adapt their firepower to whatever threats they encounter. The frag cannon's dual-mode capability reflects the Deathwatch philosophy of maintaining tactical flexibility while ensuring that their forces have the specialized tools necessary to engage any alien threat effectively. The Long Vigil represents the Deathwatch's ongoing commitment to monitoring and responding to alien threats throughout the galaxy, a campaign that has continued for millennia without respite or hope of final victory. This eternal watch recognizes that the alien threat to humanity is not a problem that can be solved through a single decisive campaign, but rather a persistent danger that requires constant vigilance and immediate response to prevent catastrophic incursions. The Long Vigil encompasses countless individual operations, from covert reconnaissance missions that gather intelligence on alien activities to full-scale military campaigns that eliminate major Xenos threats before they can spread beyond their initial targets. The operational tempo of the Long Vigil requires the Deathwatch to maintain rapid response capabilities across vast distances, with kill teams deployed throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to emerging threats within days or weeks of their identification. This deployment pattern places enormous demands on the organization's logistics and communication systems, as teams must be supplied and coordinated across distances that would challenge even the Imperial Navy's capabilities. The Deathwatch addresses these challenges through careful pre-positioning of resources, maintenance of forward operating bases, and development of specialized equipment that can operate independently for extended periods without resupply. The defense of the Jericho Reach represents one of the most significant ongoing operations of the Long Vigil, as this region faces constant pressure from multiple alien threats that require coordinated responses from Deathwatch forces. The Reach serves as a crucial gateway between the Imperium and the galaxy's outer rim, making it a strategic target for alien forces seeking to establish footholds within Imperial territory. Tyranid splinter fleets regularly probe the region's defenses, while Orc empires launch periodic wars that threaten to overwhelm isolated Imperial worlds. Eldar Corsairs conduct raids throughout the region, striking at targets that serve their incomprehensible strategic objectives before disappearing back into the webway. The Deathwatch response to threats in the Jericho Reach involves multiple kill teams operating simultaneously across dozens of systems, each adapted to address specific categories of alien threats. Anti-Tyranid operations focus on disrupting synapse networks and eliminating key bioforms that coordinate swarm activities, while anti-Orc campaigns target warbosses and key infrastructure that support Orc military capabilities. Operations against Eldar forces require different tactics entirely, as these aliens' mobility and prescient abilities make them extremely difficult to engage through conventional means. The Deathwatch has developed specialized techniques for each type of threat, incorporating lessons learned from centuries of combat experience. The Ghoul Stars region presents unique challenges for Deathwatch operations, as this area of space contains numerous alien threats that defy conventional classification and require specialized approaches that have been developed through bitter experience. The region's isolation from the main body of the Imperium makes it a haven for alien species that have been driven from more heavily defended areas, while its unstable warp currents and strange astronomical phenomena create environmental hazards that complicate military operations. Deathwatch forces operating in the Ghoul Stars must be prepared to encounter alien species that exist nowhere else in the galaxy, often possessing capabilities that challenge Imperial understanding of physics and biology. The Rangdan Xenocides, though occurring before the formal establishment of the Deathwatch, serve as a cautionary example of what can happen when alien threats are allowed to develop unchecked. The near extinction of the 2nd and 11th Space Marine Legions during these campaigns demonstrated the devastating potential of certain Xeno species and influenced the development of Deathwatch tactics and equipment. The lessons learned from these catastrophic encounters emphasize the importance of early detection and rapid response to alien threats, as allowing dangerous Xeno species to establish themselves can lead to conflicts that threaten the very survival of the Imperium. The Deathwatch maintains detailed records of the Rangdan Xenocides and other major alien conflicts, studying these historical examples to identify patterns and develop countermeasures against similar threats. The organization's archives contain classified reports on alien capabilities, tactical analyses of successful and failed operations, and technical specifications for weapons and equipment that have proven effective against specific types of Xeno's enemies. This institutional knowledge proves invaluable for training new Deathwatch operatives and developing strategies for addressing emerging alien threats that share characteristics with previously encountered species. Kill teams represent the primary operational unit of the Deathwatch, small groups of specialists selected and equipped to address specific alien threats with surgical precision. These teams typically consist of 5 to 10 Space Marines drawn from different chapters, each bringing unique skills and perspectives to the mission. The composition of a kill team is carefully planned based on intelligence about the target and the specific challenges expected during the operation. Teams facing Tyranid swarms might include specialists in heavy weapons and close quarters combat, while those engaging Eldar forces would emphasize mobility and long-range engagement capabilities. The flexibility of kill team composition allows the Deathwatch to adapt to changing threat conditions and operational requirements without the need for extensive reorganization or retraining. Team members are cross-trained in multiple specializations, ensuring that the loss of individual specialists does not compromise the team's overall effectiveness. The diverse chapter backgrounds represented within each kill team provide access to different tactical doctrines and specialized knowledge, creating a synergistic effect that makes the teams more effective than the sum of their individual members. The equipment loadout for kill teams varies significantly based on their mission parameters and the specific alien threats they are expected to encounter. Teams deployed against Tyranid forces carry weapons optimized for engaging swarm organisms, including heavy flamers, frag cannons, and specialized ammunition designed to maximize casualties among closely packed enemies. Anti-Eldar operations require different equipment entirely, emphasizing long-range weapons, advanced targeting systems, and countermeasures against alien technology. The Death Watch maintains extensive equipment pools at its watch fortresses, allowing teams to be equipped with the most appropriate tools for each specific mission. The coordination between kill teams and Ordo Xenos Inquisitors represents one of the most effective partnerships in the Imperial military structure, combining the Death Watch's specialized combat capabilities with the Inquisition's intelligence networks and investigative expertise. Inquisitors provide strategic intelligence about alien activities and coordinate broader Imperial responses to major threats, while kill teams handle the tactical aspects of eliminating specific targets or disrupting alien operations. This partnership has proven essential for addressing complex threats that require both military action and careful investigation to understand and counter effectively. The ongoing evolution of alien threats ensures that the Death Watch must constantly adapt their tactics, equipment, and organizational structure to remain effective against enemies that learn from each encounter and develop countermeasures against Imperial strategies. The emergence of new Tyranid bioforms, the development of advanced Tau technology, and the changing tactics of Eldar forces require continuous innovation and adaptation from Death Watch forces. The organization's commitment to learning from each encounter and sharing knowledge across all kill teams ensures that hard-won experience is not lost and that effective countermeasures can be rapidly disseminated throughout the force. The annals of the Inquisition are filled with individuals whose actions have shaped not only the organization itself, but the very course of Imperial history. These men and women, operating in the shadows between loyalty and damnation, have faced choices that would break lesser mortals and made decisions that echo across millennia. Their stories illuminate the fundamental tensions within the Inquisition between the pursuit of absolute purity and the pragmatic necessities of survival, in a galaxy where the enemy often employs the very tools that the righteous must sometimes consider using themselves. Gregor Eisenhorn stands as perhaps the most documented and controversial figure in inquisitorial history, his career spanning over 2 centuries and serving as a perfect illustration of how even the most dedicated servants of the Emperor can find themselves walking increasingly dangerous paths. Beginning his service as a devoted Puritan of the Ordo Xenos, Eisenhorn embodied the traditional inquisitorial virtues of unwavering faith, methodical investigation, and absolute dedication to destroying the enemies of humanity. His early cases involved straightforward Xenos threats and heretical cults that could be addressed through conventional means, establishing his reputation as a thorough investigator and effective field operative. The transformation of Eisenhorn from Puritan to radical began gradually, marked by a series of cases that forced him to confront the limitations of orthodox methods when facing enemies that operated beyond the boundaries of normal Imperial experience. His investigation of the chaos cult known as the Cogniti introduced him to adversaries who possessed knowledge and capabilities that conventional inquisitorial techniques could not effectively counter. The cult's use of demonic entities, forbidden technology, and corrupted Imperial officials created challenges that required increasingly unorthodox responses, pushing Eisenhorn to consider methods that his earlier self would have condemned as heretical. The pivotal moment in Eisenhorn's philosophical evolution came during his confrontation with the demon Cherubale, a powerful entity whose knowledge proved essential for understanding and combating even greater threats to the Imperium. Rather than simply banishing the demon, Eisenhorn made the controversial decision to bind it to his service, using its supernatural abilities and forbidden knowledge as weapons against other enemies of humanity. This decision marked his definitive break from Puritan doctrine and established him as one of the most prominent radical inquisitors of his era, willing to employ any means necessary to achieve victory against the forces of chaos. The binding of Cherubale required Eisenhorn to master techniques and knowledge that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable for an inquisitor to know. He studied demonic hierarchies, learned the true names of warp entities, and developed the psychic strength necessary to maintain control over a being whose very existence was antithetical to imperial doctrine. The process changed him fundamentally, not only in terms of his capabilities, but also in his understanding of the nature of chaos and the compromises necessary to fight it effectively. His physical appearance began to show the strain of his dealings with warp entities, while his methods became increasingly ruthless and pragmatic. The controversy surrounding Eisenhorn's methods led to conflicts with other inquisitors, who viewed his use of demonic allies as evidence of corruption that threatened to spread throughout the organization. His former protege, Gideon Ravener, found himself caught between loyalty to his mentor and growing concerns about the path Eisenhorn was following. Other members of the Ordo Xenos began to question whether Eisenhorn's victories against alien threats justified the risks he was taking with his own soul, and the potential consequences for the Imperium if his control over Cherubale ever faltered. The Pontius Glaw affair demonstrated both the effectiveness of Eisenhorn's radical methods and the dangers they posed to those around him. Glaw, a heretical tech adept whose consciousness had been preserved in a crystalline matrix, possessed knowledge about ancient technology and chaos artifacts that proved crucial for several of Eisenhorn's investigations. The decision to preserve and interrogate Glaw's consciousness rather than destroying it outright provided valuable intelligence, but also exposed Eisenhorn's associates to corrupting influences that would have long-term consequences for their own spiritual well-being. The investigation of the Necrotouch, an ancient tome containing forbidden knowledge about death and resurrection, pushed Eisenhorn even further from orthodox inquisitorial practice. His pursuit of this artifact brought him into conflict with multiple chaos cults, alien conspiracies, and even other inquisitors who sought to claim or destroy the book for their own purposes. The knowledge contained within the Necrotouch proved essential for understanding certain types of chaos corruption, but its study required Eisenhorn to delve deeper into forbidden lore than any inquisitor should safely venture. Gideon Ravener's own career began under Eisenhorn's tutelage, where he learned the fundamental skills of investigation, interrogation, and combat that would serve him throughout his service to the Inquisition. As an interrogator in Eisenhorn's retinue, Ravener demonstrated exceptional psychic abilities combined with a methodical approach to investigation that made him an ideal candidate for eventual promotion to full Inquisitor status. His early cases involved supporting Eisenhorn's operations against Xenos threats and heretical cults, experiences that provided him with extensive knowledge of alien psychology and chaos corruption, while also exposing him to his mentor's increasingly controversial methods. The catastrophic injury that confined Ravener to his life support chair occurred during a mission against a chaos cult that had infiltrated the upper levels of Imperial society on several worlds. An explosion triggered by heretical saboteurs left Ravener's body broken beyond the ability of Imperial medicine to repair, forcing him to rely on a sophisticated life support system that maintained his bodily functions while allowing his consciousness to interact with the outside world through psychic projection and technological interfaces. Rather than ending his career, this transformation actually enhanced his capabilities in certain areas, as his psychic abilities grew stronger while his dependence on technology provided him with unique insights into the machine spirits and data systems that pervaded Imperial society. The chair that houses Ravener's crippled form represents a masterwork of Imperial technology, incorporating life support systems, psychic amplification devices, and sophisticated communication arrays that allow him to function as effectively as any able-bodied Inquisitor. The chair's anti-gravity generators provide mobility across most terrain types, while its armored shell protects his vulnerable physical form from enemy attacks. Integrated weapon systems allow him to defend himself in combat situations, though his primary strength lies in his enhanced psychic abilities rather than physical confrontation. The chair's most remarkable feature is its psychic interface, which allows Ravener to project his consciousness across vast distances and interact with electronic systems through through direct mental contact. Ravner's investigation techniques evolved to take advantage of his unique circumstances, developing methods that combined traditional inquisitorial practices with capabilities that only his technological augmentation made possible. His ability to interface directly with data systems allowed him to gather intelligence from sources that would be inaccessible to conventional investigators, while his psychic projection capabilities enabled him to conduct surveillance and interrogation without revealing his physical presence. These advantages proved particularly valuable when investigating conspiracies that involved high-ranking imperial officials, or when gathering intelligence from sources that would be too dangerous for normal agents to approach. The relationship between Ravner and his former mentor became increasingly strained as Eisenhorn's radical tendencies grew more pronounced and his methods became more controversial. Ravner found himself in the difficult position of owing his career and many of his skills to a man whose actions he could no longer support, while also recognizing that Eisenhorn's knowledge and experience remained valuable assets in the fight against humanity's enemies. This conflict between personal loyalty and professional duty created tensions that would influence many of Ravner's subsequent decisions and investigations. The Malleus conspiracy, which Ravner investigated extensively during his career, demonstrated the complex web of corruption that could develop when chaos influences infiltrated multiple levels of imperial society simultaneously. The conspiracy involved corrupted noble houses, heretical tech adepts, and rogue psykers working together to undermine imperial authority while pursuing their own twisted agendas. Ravner's investigation revealed connections between seemingly unrelated incidents across multiple sectors, showing how patient enemies could build extensive networks of influence over decades or centuries before revealing their true purposes. Ravner's unique perspective as a psychic entity bound to a technological shell provided him with insights into the nature of consciousness and identity that proved valuable when dealing with enemies who employed similar combinations of technology and psychic power. His investigations often involved adversaries who had undergone various forms of technological augmentation or psychic enhancement, requiring him to understand the psychological and spiritual implications of such modifications. This expertise made him particularly effective against tech heretics and corrupted psykers who might be able to deceive investigators who lacked his specialized knowledge. Inquisitor Voke of the Ordo Malleus represents the more traditional approach to combating demonic threats, maintaining strict adherence to orthodox doctrine while developing exceptional expertise in the identification and elimination of chaos corruption. His career has been marked by a series of successful operations against major demon princes and chaos incursions, earning him recognition as one of the most effective demon hunters in the Ordo Malleus. Unlike radical inquisitors who might consider employing forbidden knowledge or demonic allies, Voke relies on conventional weapons, sanctified equipment, and the support of the Grey Knights to achieve his objectives. Voke's approach to demon hunting emphasizes preparation, intelligence gathering, and the use of blessed weapons and protective wards to neutralize the supernatural advantages that demonic entities possess over normal opponents. His retinue includes specialists in various aspects of demon lore, from tech adepts who maintain consecrated equipment to battle psykers who can detect and counter demonic psychic attacks. The composition of his forces reflects a careful balance between offensive capability and spiritual protection, ensuring that his teams can engage demonic entities effectively while minimizing the risk of corruption or possession. The Siege of Vrax saw Voke deployed alongside other Ordo Malleus forces to investigate and counter the demonic influences that were supporting the heretical rebellion on that world. His role involved identifying the sources of demonic power that were sustaining the rebellion and coordinating with Grey Knight's forces to eliminate key demon princes and greater demons that had manifested to support the heretical forces. The urban warfare that characterized much of the Vrax campaign required Voke to adapt his usual tactics to account for the complex terrain and the presence of numerous imperial forces who lacked the specialized training necessary to fight alongside Daemonhunters. Vok's investigation of the demon prince Uraka Asbaramil demonstrated his methodical approach to understanding and countering major demonic threats. Rather than attempting to engage the demon prince directly, Vok spent months gathering intelligence about its capabilities, weaknesses, and the sources of power that sustained its manifestation in real space. This preparation allowed him to coordinate a carefully planned assault that exploited the demon's vulnerabilities while minimizing the risks to Imperial forces. The successful banishment of Uraka Asbaramil required the combined efforts of multiple Grey Knight squads supported by Vok's specialized equipment and tactical coordination. The Malphalax incident showcased Vok's ability to respond rapidly to emerging demonic threats while maintaining the security necessary to prevent panic among Imperial forces and civilian populations. When a chaos cult summoning ritual threatened to create a permanent breach between real space and the warp, Vok coordinated an immediate response that involved Grey Knight's teleport assaults, orbital bombardment, and the deployment of specialized containment equipment. The operation required precise timing and coordination between multiple Imperial forces, demonstrating Vok's skills as both investigator and military commander. Fyodor Karamazov stands as one of the most controversial and influential figures in the history of the Ordo Hereticus. His extreme methods and unwavering dedication to purging heresy earning him both devoted followers and bitter enemies within the Inquisition. His career has been marked by campaigns of unprecedented scope and brutality, involving the purification of entire worlds and the elimination of corruption networks that had infected multiple levels of Imperial society. Karamazov's philosophy emphasizes the necessity of absolute action against heresy, arguing that half measures and mercy only allow corruption to spread and threaten the greater body of the Imperium. The throne of judgment that Karamazov employs in his operations represents both a practical tool and a powerful symbol of his approach to combating heresy. This massive mechanical construct serves as both transportation and mobile command center, equipped with powerful weapon systems and sophisticated communication, arrays that allow Karamazov to coordinate large-scale purification operations while remaining protected from enemy attacks. The throne's most distinctive feature is its ability to administer the Emperor's justice directly, with integrated execution devices that can eliminate heretics through various methods depending on the nature of their crimes. Karamazov's purification of the Carta system demonstrated both the effectiveness of his methods and the controversy they generate among other Imperial institutions. When investigations revealed that heretical cults had infiltrated the planetary governments of multiple worlds in the system, Karamazov ordered comprehensive purges that eliminated not only confirmed heretics, but also individuals whose loyalty was merely questionable. The scale of the executions and the destruction of infrastructure deemed potentially corrupted created significant political tensions with other Imperial organizations, while also effectively eliminating the heretical threat that had been growing unchecked for decades. The Sebastian Thor affair brought Karamazov into direct conflict with other Imperial institutions when he declared the future saint to be a heretic and ordered his execution. This decision, based on Karamazov's interpretation of Thor's teachings and his concern about the potential for religious deviation, created a crisis within the ecclesiarchy and led to armed confrontations between Karamazov's forces and Thor's followers. The eventual recognition of Thor's sanctity and his role in reforming the Imperial cult demonstrated the dangers of Karamazov's absolutist approach, while also highlighting the complex challenges faced by inquisitors when dealing with religious movements that might be either divine inspiration or dangerous heresy. Karamazov's influence on inquisitorial doctrine extends beyond his individual operations to encompass his role in training and mentoring other inquisitors who share his Puritan philosophy. His teachings emphasize the importance of decisive action against heresy, the dangers of showing mercy to the corrupt, and the necessity of maintaining absolute loyalty to the emperor's will as interpreted through orthodox imperial doctrine. These principles have influenced generations of inquisitors who view Karamazov as a model of unwavering dedication to the Inquisition's mission, while others see his methods as excessive and potentially counterproductive. The development of the redemptionist movement within the imperial cult shows Karamazov's broader influence on imperial society beyond his direct inquisitorial operations. His teachings about the necessity of purifying humanity through fire and suffering have inspired religious movements that seek to cleanse the Imperium of corruption through extreme measures. While these movements often serve useful purposes in identifying and eliminating heretical influences, they also sometimes target innocent individuals whose only crime is being different or unfortunate, creating additional challenges for other imperial institutions trying to maintain social stability. The ongoing debates within the Inquisition about the proper balance between thoroughness and restraint in combating heresy often reference Karamazov's career as an example of both the benefits and risks of extreme approaches. His supporters argue that his methods, while harsh, have proven effective at eliminating heretical threats that might have grown to threaten entire sectors if addressed through more conventional means. Critics contend that his excessive use of force creates resentment among imperial citizens and can actually drive people toward heresy by making imperial rule appear tyrannical rather than protective. The fundamental philosophical divide between Puritan and radical factions within the Inquisition represents one of the most enduring and consequential debates in imperial history, shaping not only the organization's internal dynamics, but also influencing broader imperial policy regarding the use of forbidden knowledge, alien technology, and morally questionable methods in the service of humanity's survival. This ideological schism emerged gradually during the early centuries following the Horus heresy, as individual inquisitors encountered threats that challenged their understanding of acceptable methods and forced them to confront the question of whether the ends could ever justify means that would otherwise be considered heretical or corrupting. The Puritan philosophy emerged from the traumatic lessons of the Horus heresy, where the corruption of the emperor's most trusted sons demonstrated the insidious nature of chaos and the ease with which even the most loyal servants could fall to temptation. Puritans argue that any compromise with the forces of corruption, no matter how seemingly minor or tactically advantageous, creates vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit to achieve far greater victories than any temporary tactical gain could justify. This worldview emphasizes absolute adherence to imperial doctrine, complete rejection of alien influence, and unwavering faith in the emperor's guidance as the only reliable defenses against the myriad threats facing humanity. The monodominant faction represents the most extreme expression of Puritan philosophy, advocating for the complete elimination of all non-human influences within the Imperium and the absolute supremacy of orthodox human culture and technology. Monodominants view the very existence of alien species as an affront to humanity's manifest destiny to rule the galaxy, arguing that any tolerance of Xeno's presence, whether through diplomacy, trade, or even temporary alliances against common enemies, weakens humanity's resolve and provides opportunities for alien corruption to take root within imperial society. Their approach to alien threats involves not merely military defeat, but complete extermination, ensuring that no trace of Xeno's influence can survive to threaten future generations of humanity. The monodominant interpretation of the emperor's will emphasizes his role as the master of humanity rather than merely another powerful being competing for galactic dominance. They argue that the emperor's vision for the Great Crusade involved not just the conquest of alien-held worlds, but the complete purification of the galaxy from non-human influence, creating a realm where humanity could achieve its full potential without the corrupting presence of alien ideas, technology, or genetic material. This interpretation leads monodominants to oppose any imperial policies that involve cooperation with alien forces, even when such cooperation might provide tactical advantages against common enemies like chaos or the Tyranids. The practical implications of monodominant philosophy extend beyond simple military operations to encompass broader questions of imperial governance and social policy. Monodominant inquisitors actively investigate and eliminate any evidence of alien influence within imperial culture, technology, or administrative practices, viewing such influences as seeds of corruption that will inevitably grow to threaten humanity's purity. They oppose the use of alien technology, even when such devices could provide significant advantages to imperial forces, arguing that reliance on Xeno's science weakens humanity's independence and creates dependencies that enemies can exploit. The Thorian faction within the Puritan movement focuses specifically on the Emperor's divine nature and the possibility of his eventual resurrection or return to active leadership of the Imperium. Thorians believe that the Emperor's consciousness, while bound to the Golden Throne, remains active and capable of manifesting through chosen individuals who possess sufficient faith and spiritual purity. This belief leads them to search for potential vessels for the Emperor's return, investigating reports of individuals who display miraculous abilities or divine inspiration that might indicate the Emperor's direct intervention in mortal affairs. Thorian investigations often involve careful study of saints and other individuals who have demonstrated supernatural abilities that cannot be explained through conventional understanding of psychic phenomena. They maintain detailed records of miraculous events, analyzing patterns and circumstances that might indicate the Emperor's direct involvement rather than simple psychic manifestation or warp-based phenomena. This research requires extensive theological knowledge combined with practical investigative skills, as Thorians must distinguish between genuine divine intervention and various forms of deception or corruption that might mimic such manifestations. The search for a suitable vessel for the Emperor's return has led Thorians to investigate various individuals throughout Imperial history who have demonstrated exceptional abilities or spiritual significance. The living saints of the Adeptus receive particular attention from Thorian researchers, who study their manifestations of divine power and analyze the circumstances surrounding their elevation to sainthood. The faction maintains that these individuals represent early examples of the Emperor's growing ability to manifest through mortal vessels, suggesting that his eventual return to full consciousness and physical form may be possible through similar mechanisms. Thorian philosophy emphasizes the importance of maintaining absolute spiritual purity and orthodox faith as prerequisites for serving as vessels for the Emperor's consciousness. They argue that any compromise with heretical ideas, alien influences, or chaos corruption would make an individual unsuitable for such a sacred role, regardless of their other qualifications or abilities. This belief leads Thorians to advocate for extremely strict standards of spiritual discipline and doctrinal orthodoxy among imperial servants, particularly those in positions of significant authority or influence. The Malathian faction represents a more moderate expression of Puritan philosophy, focusing on the preservation and strengthening of existing imperial institutions rather than the pursuit of radical change or purification. Malathians argue that the emperor's will is best served by maintaining the stability and continuity of the governmental, military, and religious systems that have sustained the Imperium for 10 millennia, viewing dramatic reforms or revolutionary changes as potentially destabilizing influences that could weaken humanity's defenses against its enemies. Malathian inquisitors often find themselves investigating threats that emerge from within imperial institutions themselves, seeking to identify and eliminate corruption, while preserving the fundamental structures that make effective governance possible. Their approach emphasizes careful reform and gradual improvement rather than dramatic purges or revolutionary changes, recognizing that the complex interdependencies within imperial society make sudden alterations potentially catastrophic. This philosophy requires a deep understanding of imperial bureaucracy, military organization, and religious hierarchy, as Malathians must navigate these systems effectively while working to improve their efficiency and reliability. The Malathian perspective on alien threats focuses on maintaining humanity's independence and technological superiority rather than pursuing complete extermination of all xeno species. While they share the Puritan rejection of alien corruption and influence, Amalathians are more willing to consider temporary tactical arrangements or limited cooperation when such measures serve broader imperial strategic objectives. However, they remain vigilant against any signs that such cooperation might lead to dependence on alien assistance or compromise of imperial sovereignty. The relationship between Amalathian philosophy and the broader imperial bureaucracy creates both opportunities and challenges for inquisitors who embrace this approach. Their emphasis on working within existing systems makes them valuable allies for planetary governors, military commanders, and ecclesiarchy officials who seek to improve their effectiveness without risking the instability that might result from more radical approaches. However, this same emphasis on gradual change can sometimes frustrate other inquisitors who believe that more dramatic action is necessary to address urgent threats or deeply rooted corruption. The radical philosophy emerged from the practical experiences of inquisitors who encountered threats that could not be effectively countered through orthodox methods alone, forcing them to consider whether the absolute prohibition against using enemy tools and knowledge might sometimes serve the enemy's interests better than humanity's survival. Radicals argue that the galaxy's threats have evolved beyond the scope of traditional imperial responses, requiring adaptive strategies that may involve temporary compromises with dangerous forces in order to achieve ultimate victory over even greater enemies. The Xanthite faction represents one of the most controversial expressions of radical philosophy, advocating for the controlled use of chaos artifacts and knowledge as weapons against the forces of chaos themselves. Xanthites argue that the enemy's own tools, when properly understood and carefully controlled, can provide insights and capabilities that are essential for developing effective countermeasures against chaos corruption. This approach requires extensive study of forbidden texts, careful analysis of chaos artifacts, and the development of techniques for using such materials without succumbing to their corrupting influence. Xanthite research involves the systematic study of chaos corruption patterns, demonic hierarchies, and the mechanisms through which warp entities influence the material realm. This knowledge allows them to develop more effective protective measures, create weapons that are particularly damaging to demonic entities, and identify vulnerabilities in chaos forces that can be exploited through conventional imperial tactics. However, the acquisition of such knowledge requires exposure to corrupting influences that would destroy less prepared individuals, making Xanthite operations extremely dangerous even for experienced inquisitors. The practical applications of Xanthite philosophy include the development of demon weapons that bind hostile entities to serve imperial purposes, the creation of protective wards that use chaos symbols to deflect demonic attacks, and the employment of controlled possession techniques that allow trusted individuals to gain temporary access to demonic knowledge while maintaining their essential humanity. These methods have proven effective in specific circumstances, but they require constant vigilance and extensive safeguards to prevent the corruption of the individuals involved in their implementation. Xanthite operations often involve the capture and study of chaos cultists, demon princes, and even bound demons themselves, seeking to understand the psychology and motivations that drive servants of the dark gods. This research provides valuable intelligence about chaos strategies and objectives, allowing imperial forces to anticipate and counter enemy operations more effectively. However, the process of conducting such research exposes Xanthite inquisitors and their associates to significant risks of corruption, requiring careful psychological monitoring and regular spiritual purification to maintain their loyalty to the imperial cause. The Recongregator faction focuses on the reform and revitalization of imperial institutions that have become inefficient, corrupt, or obsolete over the millennia since the Horus Heresy. Recongregators argue that the Imperium's survival depends not only on defeating external enemies, but also on adapting its governmental, military, and religious systems to address changing threats and circumstances. This philosophy emphasizes innovation, efficiency, and the elimination of bureaucratic obstacles that prevent effective responses to emerging challenges. Recongregator investigations often target imperial institutions themselves, seeking to identify systemic problems that compromise the Imperium's effectiveness while proposing practical solutions that can be implemented without destabilizing the broader governmental structure. Their approach requires extensive knowledge of imperial law, administrative procedures, and organizational theory, as they must understand how proposed changes will interact with existing systems and institutions. This expertise makes recongregators valuable consultants for planetary governors and sector commanders who seek to improve their effectiveness while maintaining compliance with imperial regulations. The recongregator perspective on technology and innovation emphasizes the importance of adapting imperial capabilities to address new threats while maintaining the spiritual and cultural foundations that define humanity's identity. They support the development of new weapons, communication systems, and transportation technologies that can improve imperial military effectiveness, but they remain cautious about innovations that might compromise human independence or introduce alien influences into imperial society. This balanced approach allows them to support technological progress while maintaining the vigilance necessary to prevent corruption or subversion. Recongregator philosophy also encompasses questions of social and economic policy, as these inquisitors recognize that the Imperium's long-term survival depends on maintaining the loyalty and productivity of its human population. They investigate economic systems that might be exploiting imperial citizens unnecessarily, social policies that create resentment or instability, and administrative practices that waste resources or create opportunities for corruption. Their recommendations often involve modest reforms that can improve conditions for imperial citizens while strengthening the overall efficiency of imperial governance. The Istvanian faction represents perhaps the most controversial and dangerous expression of radical philosophy, arguing that conflict and struggle are essential for maintaining humanity's strength and preventing the stagnation that could make the species vulnerable to external threats. Istvanians believe that periodic internal conflicts, carefully managed and controlled, serve to eliminate weakness within imperial society while strengthening the institutions and individuals that survive such trials. This philosophy leads them to sometimes encourage or orchestrate conflicts that they believe will ultimately benefit the Imperium's long-term survival. Istvanian operations often involve the deliberate creation of challenging situations that test the loyalty, competence, and resilience of imperial institutions and personnel. They may arrange for corrupt officials to be exposed to scandal, create circumstances that force military commanders to demonstrate their tactical abilities under pressure, or engineer situations that reveal hidden weaknesses in planetary defenses or administrative systems. While these activities can cause significant short-term disruption and suffering, Istvanians argue that they prevent larger catastrophes by identifying and addressing vulnerabilities before enemies can exploit them. The philosophical justification for Istvanian methods draws upon observations of natural selection and evolutionary biology, arguing that species and civilizations that avoid all challenges and conflicts become weak and vulnerable to destruction by more aggressive competitors. They point to the Eldar as an example of what happens when a species achieves too much comfort and security, becoming decadent and losing the strength necessary to defend itself against determined enemies. Istvanians believe that humanity must maintain its edge through constant testing and struggle, even if such testing sometimes involves significant costs in terms of lives and resources. The implementation of Istvanian philosophy requires careful calculation and extensive planning to ensure that orchestrated conflicts serve their intended purposes without causing catastrophic damage to imperial interests. Istvanian inquisitors must possess deep understanding of military strategy, political dynamics, and social psychology to predict how different types of conflicts will affect the institutions and individuals involved. They also require extensive networks of agents and informants to monitor the progress of their operations and intervene if circumstances develop in unexpected ways. The historical conflicts between Puritan and radical factions have shaped the development of inquisitorial doctrine and influenced broader imperial policy regarding the acceptable limits of methods used in humanity's defense. These disputes often center on specific cases where the two philosophies produce contradictory recommendations, forcing the Inquisition to choose between approaches that may have fundamentally different implications for the organization's future development and the Imperium's long-term survival. The Inquisition Wars of the 36th millennium represented the most serious internal conflict in the organization's history, arising from fundamental disagreements about the proper response to the age of apostasy and the reforms necessary to prevent similar crises in the future. The conflict began when radical factions argued that the corruption of Goge Vander and his supporters demonstrated the need for dramatic reforms in imperial governance, while Puritan factions maintained that the crisis had resulted from deviation from orthodox doctrine and that the solution lay in stricter adherence to traditional imperial principles. The escalation of philosophical disagreements into actual warfare occurred when both sides began using their inquisitorial authority to requisition military assets and pursue operations against each other, viewing their opponents as threats to the Imperium's survival that required elimination through force. The conflict involved multiple Space Marine chapters, Imperial Guard regiments, and even elements of the Imperial Navy, as different commanders found themselves forced to choose sides in a dispute that threatened to tear the Imperium apart from within. The resolution of the Inquisition Wars required intervention from the highest levels of imperial authority, including the Adeptus Custodes and the High Lords of Terra, who recognized that continued internal conflict within the Inquisition posed an existential threat to the Imperium's survival. The peace settlement established new protocols for resolving disputes between inquisitorial factions, while reaffirming the organization's fundamental commitment to the emperor's will as interpreted through established imperial doctrine. However, the underlying philosophical differences that had caused the conflict remained unresolved, ensuring that future disputes would continue to create tensions within the organization. The aftermath of the Inquisition Wars led to the establishment of formal procedures for addressing disputes between inquisitors with different philosophical approaches, including the creation of tribunals that could adjudicate conflicts and the development of protocols for sharing jurisdiction when multiple inquisitors claimed authority over the same investigation. These reforms helped prevent future conflicts from escalating to the level of open warfare, while preserving the independence and autonomy that made the Inquisition effective in its primary mission of defending humanity from its enemies. The ongoing debates surrounding the use of demon weapons illustrate the practical implications of the philosophical divide between Puritan and radical approaches to combating chaos corruption. Radical inquisitors argue that demon weapons, when properly controlled and wielded by individuals with sufficient spiritual strength, provide capabilities that are essential for defeating greater demons and demon princes that might otherwise be invulnerable to conventional imperial weapons. They point to successful operations where demon weapons have proven decisive in banishing powerful chaos entities and eliminating threats that could not have been addressed through orthodox methods. Puritan opposition to demon weapons stems from their understanding that any use of chaos-tainted artifacts creates risks of corruption that extend far beyond the immediate wielder to encompass entire investigation teams and potentially broader imperial forces. They argue that the temporary tactical advantages provided by demon weapons are outweighed by the long-term risks of corruption, possession, and the gradual erosion of spiritual defenses that occurs when individuals become accustomed to using the enemy's tools. The Puritan position emphasizes that effective alternatives to demon weapons exist in the form of blessed imperial weapons, sanctified ammunition, and the support of specialized forces like the Grey Knights. The practical experience of inquisitors who have used demon weapons provides evidence for both sides of this debate, with some individuals successfully employing such weapons for decades without apparent corruption, while others have fallen to possession or madness after relatively brief exposure. The variability in outcomes suggests that individual factors such as spiritual strength, psychological resilience, and the specific nature of the demon bound within each weapon play crucial roles in determining whether such tools can be used safely by Imperial servants. The opening of the Great Rift fundamentally transformed the operational environment in which the Inquisition operates, creating challenges and opportunities that would have been unimaginable during the previous 10 millennia of Imperial history. The massive warp storm that split the galaxy in half disrupted astropathic communications across vast regions, severed established supply lines, and created zones of temporal distortion where standard Imperial doctrine and procedures proved inadequate. For an organization that had built its effectiveness on galaxy-spanning intelligence networks and rapid response capabilities, the Great Rift represented both an existential threat and a catalyst for necessary adaptation. The immediate aftermath of the Great Rift's opening saw inquisitorial forces scattered across both sides of the galactic divide, with many operatives finding themselves cut off from their superiors and support networks for extended periods. Watch fortresses that had served as regional coordination centers for centuries suddenly found themselves isolated, forced to operate independently while maintaining their vigilance against threats that multiplied exponentially in the chaotic conditions following the Rift's emergence. The disruption of astropathic communications meant that intelligence gathered in one sector might take months or years to reach Inquisitors operating in adjacent regions, fundamentally altering the organization's ability to coordinate responses to large-scale threats. The return of Robute Guilliman to active leadership of the Imperium created unprecedented changes in the relationship between the Inquisition and the broader Imperial hierarchy. For the first time since the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne, a Primarch walked among the institutions of the Imperium with the authority to restructure and reform governmental systems that had remained largely unchanged for millennia. Guilliman's pragmatic approach to Imperial governance and his willingness to question established procedures created both opportunities and tensions for an organization that had operated with near absolute autonomy for 10,000 years. The Lord Commander's assessment of Imperial institutions included careful scrutiny of the Inquisition's methods, effectiveness, and accountability structures. While Guilliman recognized the essential role that the organization played in defending humanity from internal threats, he also identified inefficiencies and excesses that had developed over millennia of unchecked authority. His reforms introduced new oversight mechanisms and coordination requirements that forced the Inquisition to justify its actions to a degree that many veteran Inquisitors found uncomfortable and potentially compromising to their operational effectiveness. The plague wars that erupted across Ultramar and the surrounding regions provided the first major test of how the Inquisition would adapt to operating under Guilliman's reformed command structure. The massive chaos incursion led by Mortarion and his Death Guard required coordinated responses from multiple Imperial institutions, including extensive cooperation between the Inquisition, the reformed Space Marine chapters, and the reorganized Imperial Guard. The scale and complexity of the threat demanded new approaches to intelligence sharing, resource allocation, and tactical coordination that challenged traditional inquisitorial independence. Ordo Malleus forces deployed during the Plague Wars found themselves working more closely with conventional Imperial military units than had been typical in previous conflicts, as the widespread nature of the chaos corruption required integrated responses that combined specialized anti-demon capabilities with massive conventional firepower. The presence of Primaris Space Marines in these operations introduced new variables that Inquisitors had to account for, as these enhanced warriors possessed capabilities that differed significantly from traditional Astartes, while maintaining the same proud traditions and independent spirit that had sometimes created friction with inquisitorial authority. The integration of Primaris Space Marines into existing Imperial command structures presented unique challenges for Inquisitors accustomed to working with traditional Astartes forces. The enhanced physiology and advanced equipment of the Primaris Marines provided significant tactical advantages, but their creation through Belisarius' technological innovations also raised questions about the acceptable limits of genetic modification and technological augmentation. Some Inquisitors viewed the Primaris project with suspicion, concerned that such dramatic alterations to the sacred Astartes template might create vulnerabilities to corruption or introduce alien influences into humanity's most elite warriors. The expanded Tyranid invasions that followed the Great Rift's opening demonstrated the galaxy's increased vulnerability to external threats while highlighting the need for new approaches to combating swarm-based enemies. The Ordo Xenos found itself facing Tyranid incursions on a scale that dwarfed previous encounters, with multiple hive fleets approaching the galaxy simultaneously, while the disrupted state of Imperial communications made coordinated responses extremely difficult. The biological adaptations displayed by these new Tyranid organisms suggested that the hive mind had learned from previous encounters with Imperial forces and developed countermeasures against many traditional anti-Tyranid tactics. Deathwatch forces operating against the expanded Tyranid threat had to develop new techniques for disrupting synapse networks and eliminating key bioforms, while operating with limited support from other Imperial institutions. The scale of the invasions meant that traditional kill team operations, while still essential for precision strikes against critical targets, had to be supplemented with larger-scale military operations that required extensive coordination with Imperial Guard regiments and Space Marine chapters. This shift toward larger operations created new challenges for maintaining the secrecy and operational security that had traditionally characterized Deathwatch activities. The growing influence of chaos throughout the galaxy created unprecedented challenges for the Ordo Hereticus, as the disruption caused by the Great Rift and the ongoing warfare created conditions that favored the spread of heretical movements and chaos cults. Populations subjected to constant warfare, supply shortages, and the breakdown of normal governmental services proved increasingly susceptible to the promises of chaos cults offering hope, power, or simply survival in exchange for devotion to the dark gods. The scale of these heretical movements often exceeded what traditional inquisitorial investigation techniques could address, requiring new approaches that combined intelligence gathering with large-scale military operations. The Adeptus sororitas found their role expanding significantly during this period, as their resistance to corruption and their ability to inspire loyalty among Imperial citizens made them invaluable assets for combating the widespread heretical movements that emerged in the wake of the Great Rift. Orders militant that had previously focused on protecting specific sacred sites or conducting targeted operations against heretical cults found themselves deployed in extended campaigns to purify entire sectors where chaos corruption had taken root among the general population. The introduction of new Imperial technologies, including advanced communication systems, improved weapons, and enhanced detection equipment, provided the Inquisition with capabilities that significantly enhanced their operational effectiveness, while also creating new challenges for maintaining security and preventing technological secrets from falling into enemy hands. The development of these technologies by Belisarius' and his associates required careful oversight from inquisitorial tech specialists who needed to ensure that innovations designed to strengthen Imperial forces did not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. The integration of new technologies into existing inquisitorial command structures required extensive retraining of personnel and modification of operational procedures that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. Servo-skulls equipped with enhanced sensors and communication arrays provided unprecedented surveillance capabilities, but they also created new requirements for data processing and analysis that strained existing intelligence networks. Advanced weapon systems offered improved effectiveness against various types of enemies, but they also required specialized maintenance and supply chains that could be vulnerable to disruption during extended operations. Resource limitations became increasingly critical challenges for the Inquisition as the scale of threats facing the Imperium expanded beyond the organization's traditional capacity to address through small-scale, precisely targeted operations. The simultaneous emergence of multiple major threats across both sides of the Great Rift meant that inquisitorial forces found themselves stretched thin, forced to prioritize threats, and accept that some dangerous situations would have to be addressed by less specialized Imperial forces or left unresolved until resources became available. The vast scale of threats emerging in the era Indomitus fundamentally challenged the Inquisition's traditional approach of addressing problems through the deployment of small, elite teams capable of surgical precision in eliminating specific targets. The emergence of chaos incursions spanning multiple sectors, Tyranid invasions involving dozens of hive fleets, and heretical movements encompassing entire subsectors required responses that exceeded what even the most capable inquisitors could coordinate through their personal retinues and requisitioned assets. The challenge of maintaining imperial unity across a divided galaxy became one of the most significant strategic concerns for the Inquisition, as the disruption of communications and transportation networks created opportunities for separatist movements, rogue planetary governors, and ambitious sector commanders to assert independence from central imperial authority. The organization's traditional role in monitoring and eliminating internal threats to imperial unity became more complex when the practical ability of the central government to project power and maintain control was severely compromised by the physical barriers created by the Great Rift. The emergence of the Imperium Nihilus, the region of the galaxy cut off from Terra by the Great Rift, created unprecedented challenges for maintaining inquisitorial authority and coordination in areas where traditional command structures had been severed or severely disrupted. Inquisitors operating in these regions found themselves forced to make decisions and take actions that would previously have required consultation with higher authorities, while also dealing with local imperial commanders who might question inquisitorial authority in the absence of clear communication with Terra. The development of new coordination mechanisms between different inquisitorial ordos became essential for addressing threats that crossed traditional jurisdictional boundaries with increasing frequency. The complex nature of many emerging threats meant that effective responses required expertise from multiple ordos working together, rather than the traditional approach of assigning primary responsibility to a single ordo based on the apparent nature of the threat. Joint operations between the Ordo Malleus and Ordo Hereticus became common when investigating chaos cults that combined heretical religious movements with demonic summoning, while cooperation between the Ordo Xenos and Ordo Malleus was necessary when addressing alien species that employed chaos corruption as a weapon. The strain placed on inquisitorial personnel by the increased operational tempo and the expanded scale of threats led to concerns about maintaining the psychological and spiritual health of operatives who found themselves constantly deployed against enemies that tested the limits of human endurance and sanity. The traditional methods of psychological conditioning and spiritual preparation that had proven adequate for previous generations of inquisitors required enhancement and adaptation to address the unique stresses created by operating in a galaxy where the fundamental nature of reality had been altered by the Great Rift's influence. The recruitment and training of new inquisitorial personnel became increasingly challenging as the organization's operational requirements expanded, while the pool of suitable candidates remained limited by the stringent standards necessary to ensure loyalty and resistance to corruption. The accelerated training programs developed to address personnel shortages had to balance the need for rapid deployment of new operatives against the traditional requirements for extensive psychological conditioning and spiritual preparation that had historically ensured the reliability of inquisitorial agents. The relationship between the Inquisition and other imperial institutions continued to evolve as the practical necessities of survival in the era Indomitus forced greater cooperation and coordination than had been typical in previous millennia. The scale of threats facing the Imperium meant that no single institution possessed the resources or capabilities necessary to address major challenges independently, requiring unprecedented levels of cooperation and information sharing between organizations that had traditionally maintained strict operational security and independence. The legacy of the Inquisition's first 11 millennia of service provided both advantages and challenges as the organization adapted to the realities of the era Indomitus. The accumulated knowledge, experience, and institutional traditions that had been developed over centuries of operations against humanity's enemies provided essential foundations for addressing new threats, while also creating inertia and resistance to changes that might be necessary for effective adaptation to fundamentally altered circumstances. As the era Indomitus progresses, the Inquisition continues to evolve and adapt to meet the unprecedented challenges facing humanity in a galaxy split by the Great Rift. The organization's fundamental mission remains unchanged: to protect humanity from the enemies that threaten it from within and without. But the methods, scale, and coordination required to fulfill this mission have been transformed by the realities of a galaxy where the very nature of space and time has been altered by the forces of chaos. The Inquisition's ability to maintain its effectiveness while adapting to these new realities will play a crucial role in determining whether humanity can survive and ultimately triumph in the dark millennium that lies ahead. The future of the Inquisition in the era Indomitus remains unwritten, but the organization's history of adaptation and resilience in the face of seemingly impossible challenges provides hope that it will continue to serve as humanity's shield against the darkness. The lessons learned from 10 millennia of warfare against the enemies of mankind, combined with the innovations and adaptations forced by current circumstances, position the Inquisition to continue its eternal vigil as the Emperor's most dedicated servants in the endless war for humanity's survival.